Hey, sleepyheads. Today, let's listen to the lores of the underrated episodes of our beloved cartoons. Before we begin, please tell me where you are watching from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments and subscribe to Sleepy Tunes. Close your eyes and settle in. Tonight, we're not chasing the biggest battles or the loudest laughs. We're slipping into the quiet corners of the cartoons we grew up with. The episodes that aired once on a sleepy afternoon, tucked between heavy hitters and cliffhangers. They were softer, stranger, braver in small ways, and they stayed with us. Let's begin with our beloved Courage, the cowardly dog. The plains of nowhere breathe in and out. Wind moves like a slow tide over wheat and sage. The farmhouse sits by itself, a soft square of lamplight against the wide night. Inside, the kettle hums. A clock on the wall speaks in patient ticks. Courage curls by Muriel's feet, ears twitching at distant sounds that only he seems to hear. Muriel's knitting needle slips through yarn in quiet loops. Eustace unfolds a newspaper and pretends to read. The paper rustles louder than it needs to. The wind finds the eaves. A single, wandering bell sounds far away, a small silver note in the dark. Courage lifts his head. The note comes again, a little closer, then closer still, like a traveler who cannot decide if it is better to knock or continue walking forever. Courage pads to the door and listens. The night is cool and generous. He feels the shape of a stranger on the porch. Not danger, only a weight like a tired suitcase set down carefully. He looks back at Muriel. She sets her knitting aside and stands. Eustace does not look up, though his hand pauses on the paper. Muriel opens the door. The hunchback stands under the lintel, damp from the wind, coat hanging loose, eyes deep and careful. He carries no threat, only the ache of being turned away too many times. The bell is tied to his walking stick. He gives one last note, then rests. "Good evening," says Muriel. "Come inside and warm yourself." The hunchback hesitates. Kindness can feel like a trap when life has been a long corridor of unkind doors. Courage steps forward first. He sits and wags his tail with that small, brave tremble he gets when his heart is bigger than his fear. The stranger nods. He crosses the threshold. Steam sighs from the kettle. Muriel pours tea and sets out bread. Eustace peeks over the paper and mutters about drafts and wanderers. The clock continues to tick, a steady lighthouse for tired minds. The wind lowers itself and settles under the eaves. The farmhouse has taken in a guest. Courage curls near the chair and lets the rhythm of voices turn to a lull. He listens to the old boards creak. He listens to the bell on the walking stick, now quiet on the mat. Sleep is not a door that slams. It is a hallway of soft rugs. Courage places one paw into that hallway as the night begins its long, gentle journey. The kitchen glows with the kind of light that forgives rough edges. Muriel sets a bowl in front of the hunchback, steam rising in slow braids. "Oh, thank you," he says, voice barely above the whisper of the kettle. He tastes the soup and closes his eyes for a moment that is almost prayer. Courage watches the way the man's shoulders lower, inch by inch, as warmth returns. Eustace grumbles that strays invite trouble. Muriel replies that trouble visits whether we invite it or not, and a full belly helps a soul think straight. Courage noses the napkin toward the guest. The hunchback smiles at the small gesture and takes it. His hands are chapped, yet careful, the hands of someone who has learned to carry fragile things without breaking them, even when the world has not been gentle in return. The wind softens outside, more hush than howl. The stranger speaks in small pieces. He tells of roads that stretch like questions. He tells of church steps where he sat through rain, of markets where laughter turned sharp, of a circus tent that folded in a hurry, leaving him between footprints and tire tracks. He tells of a bell that keeps him company because he likes to know where he is, even in the dark. Courage brings him a quilt from the parlor. Muriel sets it over his knees. Eustace says nothing and pretends to be asleep in his chair. The pretense lets him listen without admitting that he is listening. They sit with the quiet the way you sit with a cat who chooses your lap. No one moves quickly. The old clock walks its round steps. In the long spaces between words, Courage hears the house breathe. He hears the rafters relax, the roof joints sigh. He hears a drip in the pantry where a jar was not sealed tight. Small sounds, honest and harmless. The hunchback thanks them for the soup. He says the kindness feels like a lantern carried beside him. Not in front, not behind. He is not asked to become someone else in order to be welcome. Courage places his head on the man's knee. In that simple trust, a cord ties itself from the guest to the room and from the room back to him. The knot is small but real. They make a bed on the settee. Muriel brings an extra pillow. The hunchback touches the bell on his stick once. It answers with a soft note that seems to say, "I am here." The farmhouse grows quieter still, as if the night drapes a heavier blanket upon it. Courage keeps watch until his own eyes drowse and his chin sinks. Warm fur against warm cloth, the air scented with soup and wood and wool. Sometime in the blue middle of the night, a thin drip starts tapping a tin bowl under the leak in the parlor ceiling. The bowl was set there weeks ago, a promise to fix the roof when Weather and Will agreed. The drip is persistent. Courage lifts his head. The hunchback is awake too, not from fear, only from the long habit of light sleeping in unfamiliar rooms. Courage moves toward the back door. The hunchback follows, taking the bell from his stick so it will not ring. The night air is clean and cool. Stars lean over the farmhouse like neighborly elders. The ladder waits along the fence. Courage nudges it, then looks up at the roof line. The hunchback understands. He has moved carefully around edges all his life. He knows the art of slow climbing. They raise the ladder together, step by step. No clatter, only the whisper of wood on wood. Courage steadies the base, and the hunchback climbs. On the ridge, the wind is calmer than it was earlier, as if it too wants to sleep. The hunchback finds the loose shingle and smooths it back into place. He hums a tune that does not need words. Courage, below, hums along in his own way, a soft sound in his throat. From inside, Muriel watches through the curtain for a moment, sees the shape of two figures working in quiet agreement, and smiles. She does not call out. Some scenes are best left to finish without applause. Eustace snores in a steady saw, a sound that somehow keeps time with the drip that is already less insistent. The hunchback climbs down. He presses the shingle with his palm one last time, a small promise sealed. Courage trots to the windmill. A kite string is tangled around its base, the tail fluttering like a trapped thought. Together they loosen the string, patient and precise. The kite finally frees itself and lies against the grass, as if relieved of a long worry. The hunchback hands the kite to Courage, who carries it inside and sets it by the hearth. Later, when morning comes, Muriel will say, "It is a cheerful thing to wake to." They return to the parlor. The bowl under the leak is quiet now. The silence that replaces the drip is not empty. It is full of accomplishment and calm. The hunchback places the bell back on his stick, and the bell answers with a tiny note. Not loud at all, only enough to say yes. They lie down again. Courage tucks himself along the stranger's side without fuss. Breath by breath, the house settles deeper. The clock keeps walking its circle, keeping everyone company. Outside, the windmill turns once and stops. The fields go on breathing. Sleep drifts closer, like fog that knows the path by heart. A while later, a thud echoes from the barn. The door has slipped its latch. Eustace, startled awake, grumbles that guests make trouble, then refuses to get up. Courage stands. The hunchback stands. The two cross the yard side by side, their shadows soft and long on the ground. Inside the barn, the animals shift in their pens. A loose beam hangs by a rusty nail, swaying above a stack of crates. The wind pushes once and the beam tilts. Courage growls a warning. The hunchback steps to the side, raises both hands, and takes the weight with a quiet strength, born not from size, but from practice in holding burdens safely. Courage drags a crate, then another, building a small platform. The hunchback eases the beam down onto it. Nails and hammer lie in a coffee can. Courage noses them over and wags once. The hunchback sets the beam properly and taps the nail back through, careful and exact. Tap by tap, danger leaves the air. Calm replaces it like a tide returning to shore. Outside, footsteps crunch. Eustace appears in the doorway with his hat crooked and a scowl fixed in place like a badge he believes he must wear. He sees the beam, sees the neat work, sees the guests who have solved a problem he refused to see. His scowl falters. He tries on a sneer instead, but it does not fit as well as it did earlier. There is straw on the floor, and the smell of hay and oil. The hunchback brushes dust from his sleeves. He does not defend himself. He does not explain. Courage looks up at Eustace with clear eyes and a gentle tail. He is not asking for thanks. He is offering an easy way back to simple decency. Eustace grunts about standards and shuffles off. For him, the change will come slowly. For now, he does not insult the guest. That is enough. Back in the kitchen, Muriel has placed a kettle on the stove. She does not ask for the story. She pours 3 cups and puts honey in the middle of the table. The hunchback wraps his hands around the cup, the way people do when they want to warm more than fingers. Courage sits, head slightly tilted, as if listening for quiet instructions written in the steam. They speak about practical things. The barn latch needs a new screw. The fence wants mending near the southern post. The path to the well has a stone that tilts and will twist an ankle one day. They trade small plans like neighbors trade seeds. Each plan's a promise of tomorrow. The sky outside changes its tone by a shade you almost cannot see unless you are a patient watcher. Courage is patient. The hunchback is too. The night is not over, yet it knows which way it is going. Everyone in the farmhouse knows as well. The longest shadows are behind them. The smallest hopes are in front, and they are growing. The hour before dawn is a quiet church of its own, even without bells. Courage and the hunchback sit on the porch steps. The fields are silvered and still. Breath rises in small clouds. Muriel leaves them a plate of toast and goes to stir porridge, humming under her breath. Eustace rattles in the back room but does not shout. Courage looks at the walking stick and the bell tied near the top. He touches the bell with his nose, and it answers with a note so soft it could be mistaken for a memory. The hunchback tells him that long ago someone tied that bell to the stick so they would not lose one another in a crowd. The someone did not stay. The bell did. Courage understands the way objects keep faithful when people sometimes cannot. In the gray light, words come easier. The hunchback explains how the world teaches some to stoop even before their backs bend. He explains how a single kind gaze can change the way a road looks, how it can brighten gravel and soften dust. He does not ask for pity. He speaks as if telling the weather, honest and direct, with pockets of humor tucked in like handkerchiefs. Courage shares, too, in the language of small sounds and wide eyes. He speaks of fear that arrives without knocking, and of love that answers anyway. Oh, they rise and walk to the old farmhouse clock, a tall piece made by someone long gone who loved wood and patience. The clock's chime has been off by a note for months. The hunchback listens, then opens the glass, then adjusts a tiny screw. The next chime lands true. It is a gentle sound, round and bright, the kind of tone that makes walls feel closer and blankets feel heavier, in the best way. Muriel calls them in for porridge with cinnamon. They eat without hurry. Eustace takes his bowl and sits at the table without complaint. That counts as progress. The hunchback thanks them. He says he needed a place where silence did not feel like judgment, but like peace. Courage brings the rescued kite to the porch and props it where the sun will find it. The first thin gold line appears at the far edge of the field, as if someone is drawing morning with a pencil. The bell on the stick gives one more breath of a note. The house seems to nod. The day is almost here, and it looks gentle. Light pours across the plain in patient layers. It touches the fence posts. It tips the windmill. It slides along the roof where a loose shingle now rests firm. It finds the porch and warms the boards. Courage sits beside the hunchback and watches the colors deepen. Muriel joins them with a wrapped bundle of bread and cheese for the road. Eustace appears in the doorway. He holds a jar of nails and a new latch for the barn. He sets them down with a grunt that could mean many things. This morning, it means thank you in his own sideways way. The hunchback rises. He stands a little taller, not because his back has changed, but because the weight on it has. He ties the bundle to a stick below the bell. Courage places his paw on the man's boot. Neither rushes the moment. Goodbyes are better when they are not shoved out the door. "Oh, you will always have a place by this hearth," says Muriel. "Take the bell's note with you and follow it back when you wish." The hunchback smiles, and the smile is an honest piece of light on a well-used face. He answers that he will carry the sound of this kitchen and the smell of this porch and the small courage of a small dog in his coat like a hidden pocket that no thief can find. Eustace gestures at the barn as if to say, "Do not forget my latch." The hunchback nods solemnly, and Eustace almost laughs. They walk to the gate together. The wind uses its inside voice. The fields bend in greeting. The road is not new, but it looks different when you begin it with a full heart. The hunchback sets out. The bell offers a final soft note, a silver thread drawn across the morning. Courage follows for a little while, then stops at the place where the path turns. He sits, tail relaxed, ears easy. He does not whine. Trust sometimes sounds like silence. The hunchback lifts his stick in a farewell that needs no words. He walks on, and the figure grows smaller, then blends with the glimmering heat that is already rising from the road. The farmhouse waits behind Courage, warm and rested. He turns back to it. Muriel is at the door. Eustace is already at the barn with the new latch. Life continues, changed in the way that matters, unchanged in the ways that keep the world steady. Courage lies down by the porch step. The clock inside chimes the hour in the new tone they set together. Birds begin their morning talk. The rescued kite leans in the sun and glows. Courage closes his eyes. The wind strokes his ears. The world is safe enough for sleep. The bell's memory lingers in the air, a promise that those who carry kindness will always hear the way home. Courage drifts, not falling but floating, across a sea of soft hours. The farmhouse breathes with him. The fields breathe with the farmhouse. The sky breathes with the fields. Somewhere on the road, a traveler smiles at nothing and everything all at once and keeps walking toward a day that finally sounds like peace. Let's begin with Scooby-Doo Lore. The road hums like a lullaby beneath the mystery machine. Outside, the ocean breathes slowly against the rocks, sending up a mist that hangs in the headlight beams like sleepy dust. Scooby presses his nose to the window and fogs the glass, then draws an oval with his paw, peeking out at the lanterns that swing over Fennec Pier. Shaggy unwraps a sandwich the size of a pillow and takes a quiet bite so the night stays calm. Daphne adjusts a scarf that looks the color of saltwater taffy. Fred keeps the wheel steady. Velma's flashlight rests across an open notebook, the beam tucked into the spine like a bookmark of light. Velma reads softly, almost a murmur. Fennec Pier, closed for the season. Reports of a bell ringer in the fog and strange deliveries left at midnight. Daphne traces the inked map with one fingertip. There's the old Rosedale Creamery near the boardwalk, the shuttered carousel, and a path to the bluff where the lighthouse sleeps. Fred nods. We keep together. We ask kind questions. We listen more than we talk. They roll to a stop outside a small inn with a driftwood sign shaped like a key. The key house has 12 rooms. The porch steps sigh under their feet, polite and tired. A brass bell sits on the counter inside. Nobody stands behind it. The guest book yawns open to the last page signed weeks ago. Daphne calls hello with a gentleness that will not wake anything that needs rest. A door behind the desk eases open. A woman with gray hair and a plait appears, her eyes soft and sea-colored. She introduces herself as Alma, caretaker for the quiet months. You must be here for the fog stories, Alma says in a voice made of tea and wool. Fred smiles and explains they heard about the bell ringer, who leaves packages no one claims. Alma nods, glances at the window where the mist strokes the pane, then lifts a small tin box from a drawer. The box is labeled Lost Keys. She sets it down as if it has a heartbeat. One by one, she tips out brass tags shaped like little shields. Each is stamped with a number, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12, and one more that does not match. It is older, heavier, the brass worn thin where many thumbs have rubbed it smooth. Its number is 13. Alma lowers her voice. There was never a room 13 here, but this keeps turning up on the porch, on the boardwalk bench, at the creamery door. The bell ringer leaves it like a polite reminder of something we forgot. Velma leans in. The tag smells faintly of salt and machine oil. She notes the small crest etched near the number, a pelican with folded wings. Scooby sniffs the tag and sneezes once, then tilts his head until his ears make a pair of sleepy sails. Roo-roo, he says, which in the hush of this lobby means, perhaps, the key wants us to borrow it. Shaggy opens a thermos and pours cocoa into paper cups for everyone, and an extra generous pour for Scooby. Alma reaches under the counter and brings up a wrapped bundle. Sandwiches for the night watch, she says. The bell ringer uses the North Pier at midnight. The carousel sings sometimes when nobody is near it, and the creamery doors breathe in and out like an old sleeper who dreams of winter. They settle into the inn's parlor to wait. The clock on the mantel marks each minute with a small wooden tick. Scooby and Shaggy share a plate of sugar cookies dusted, like the pier, with powdered snow. Daphne stitches a loose button back onto Shaggy's cuff. Fred studies the map, adding a circle around the creamery. Velma traces the pelican crest onto a fresh page and writes the number 13 below it. Then a question mark that looks like it's taking a nap. Near midnight, the fog leans closer to the windows. A far bell begins to ring, a calm note, patient and even, counting the seconds between each tone as if laying down stepping stones in the mist. The gang moves to the porch. The sound comes from the North Pier where a shadow drifts, tall and slender, careful and sure-footed. The figure carries a lantern that doesn't flare so much as glow like a warm thought. The bell hangs from the lantern hook and sways with the rhythm of unhurried steps. They follow, keeping their breaths quiet. The planks of the pier are soft with age and salt. The sea below whispers gentle secrets to the pilings. At the far end, the bell ringer sets a small parcel on the bench, pats it the way people pat a cat they trust, and turns back into the fog without fuss. Fred steps forward, palms open, and calls out a good evening that holds no chase in it. The figure pauses, then nods without turning and keeps on. The bell sounds one last time and softens into the night. Velma kneels by the parcel. It is wrapped with careful hands in brown paper and twine. The twine knot is simple and honest, the way sailors tie things they want to find quickly in the dark. She loosens it, folds the paper back, and reveals an old ledger book. The cover bears the pelican crest, faded but still present. Inside, lines of tidy handwriting list deliveries to places in town. Carousel, Creamery, Lighthouse Maintenance Closet, Cranberry Co-op at the Marsh Road. Each entry has the number 13 stamped in the margin, as if a separate hand added it later. Daphne runs her finger down the page and stops at a note near the bottom. Room 13 receives the leftovers, so nothing goes to waste. The writing dips on the last word and trails away. Shaggy swallows. Leftovers sound like a nice word for snacks. Scooby nods, ears perking, then droop again when the fog winds through the railing like a scarf and cools his nose. Fred turns the page. A brittle photograph slips out and lands in Scooby's paw. He holds it up. In the picture, the creamery doors stand open. Workers in white coats pose in front, with their hats tilted, faces bright as new coins. On the back, in pencil, someone wrote a date and a name. Alma Rosedale. Daphne smiles. Alma from the inn. Velma presses her lips together in a thoughtful line. The ledger and the key tag and the bell ringer are holding hands. They thank the pier with a last look and walk the quiet boardwalk to the inn. Alma waits with a kettle steaming like a small cloud. When she sees the photograph, she touches the edge with the sort of care people reserve for baby birds and old letters. "My aunt," she says, "and the creamery where winters smelled like vanilla. We closed when the freezers failed one after another and the delivery ledgers went missing. The workers went to other towns. The carousel music sounded wrong for a week, then stopped." Velma opens the ledger to the page about leftovers and room 13. Alma nods again, a slow nod that says a story is finding its way home. She turns to the window where fog presses its soft cheek to the glass and speaks as if to the night. The bell ringer took over when the town fell quiet. Someone kept making deliveries to places nobody visited, as if feeding the bones of old work so the town would not forget how to breathe. Scooby yawns a wide, round yawn and rests his chin on the ledger. The brass key tag glows a little in the lamplight, number 13 rubbed smooth by absent thumbs. The mantel clock gives a wooden sigh at the top of the hour. Outside, the sea rolls and settles, rolls and settles. Velma closes the ledger gently. Tomorrow before dawn they will visit the creamery. They will listen for breathing doors and for music that wants to be right again. Fred tucks the brass tag into a pocket and pats it like a promise. Daphne folds the brown paper the parcel came in, neat and square, and slips it with the photograph into her bag. Shaggy and Scooby carry the sandwich bundle upstairs as if transporting treasure. The inn quiets around them like a big kind hand cupped over a candle to keep it steady. Somewhere in the fog, the bell ringer walks, counting steps, laying down notes for them to follow. Room 13, Velma writes in her notebook before sleep. Not a room, a kindness, a place you make when there is no place. Before dawn, the town holds its breath. The street lamps wear halos in the fog. The mystery machine glides along the boardwalk and comes to rest beside the Rosedale Creamery. a brick building with letters faded soft as chalk. The double doors are closed but not tense, the way sleeping hands rested on a quilt. A faint exhale moves through the seams in and out, as if the old freezers are dreaming of winter. Fred tries the handle with a steady touch. It gives. Inside, the air is cool and sweet with a memory of vanilla. A lantern glow reaches ahead from Velma's flashlight, soft and even. The tiled floor is dusted with a delicate frost where cold once lived. Scooby places each paw carefully, pads whispering. Shaggy follows, a thermos tucked like a warm stone in his hands. Daphne trails her fingers along a line of milk tokens in a display case, each stamped with the pelican crest that matches the brass tag. The creamery machinery sits like oversized instruments in a quiet orchestra. Pipes curve overhead in gentle loops. Gauges sleep with their eyes half open. Velma kneels by a compressor and listens. The motor is silent, yet somewhere a small, rhythmic click taps time. She follows the sound to a service door tucked behind stacked crates. The crates are stamped for lighthouse deliveries and carousel concession stock, both marked with the number 13 in the corner, as if a secret postman left his signature. Scooby's nose finds a thread of scent that is not sea or sugar. It is linen and oil and something like old paper heated by a hand. He sneezes once and points with his paw toward the door. Fred eases it open. A service corridor runs narrow and clean, painted the color of seawater at dawn. The rhythmic click grows clearer. Daphne notices a string line along the baseboard, taut and precise, leading down the hall like a kite held by an invisible child. They walk together. The creamery breath fades behind them. The corridor turns left, then right, with the certainty of a path used often and kindly. The click resolves into a bell, not ringing but breathing, the clapper tapping the hook when the lantern carrier moves. Ahead, a dim glow slides across the wall and pauses, then moves again. Fred raises his hand and they slow, feet soft, voices kept for later. At the corridor's end, an iron door waits with a pelican crest engraved above the latch. The brass is polished where a careful thumb has smoothed it 1,000 times. The number 13 is stamped small near the hinge. Velma takes the tag from Fred's pocket and holds it beside the crest. The shapes agree like old friends finding one another in a crowd. She slips the tag into a shallow slot hidden in the scrollwork. The latch answers with a quiet, grateful click. Inside is not a room. It is a storeroom made of good intentions. Shelves hold parcels wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, each labeled in tidy hand. Carousel gear oil, lighthouse wicks, boardwalk salt, co-op jam jars. On a small table sits a ledger twin to the one from the pier, open to today's date. A line already written there reads, Fennec Pier bench delivery completed. Another line waits empty, the pen laid across it as though warming a seat. A motion in the far corner resolves into the bell ringer, tall and composed, lifting a lantern from a hook. The figure's coat falls straight and simple. The hat brim is low, hiding everything but a shape that looks carved from quiet. Fred speaks first, gentle as a tide. We're here to help. The deliveries look like a promise, and promises should not be carried alone. The bell ringer turns, not startled, only measuring. The lantern glow paints their face in warm pieces. Kind eyes live there. A faint scar draws a line at the jaw like a stitch in a well-used sail. The bell ringer nods once. The voice that answers is soft and steady. Towns forget themselves when no one feeds their corners. Room 13 is my reminder to keep feeding them. Velma's pencil waits at the edge of her notebook. She does not interrupt. Daphne looks around the shelves the way gardeners look at seedlings, proud and careful. Shaggy and Scooby set down the sandwich bundle Alma gave them on the table, half for now, half for later. The bell ringer smiles the kind of smile you feel in your shoulders. They work together without hurry. Fred lifts a crate marked carousel bearings. Daphne wraps fresh wax paper around a stack of cones meant for the summer that will come again. Velma reads the routes aloud like a lullaby. Scooby balances a small package on his head and walks proudly down the corridor and back, a practicing messenger with perfect posture. Shaggy ties twine with the neatness of someone who knows how to keep lunches safe on long days. Between tasks, they ask questions that are really invitations. Who started this, Velma wonders. The bell ringer touches the pelican crest above the door. Rosedale, the aunt, the workers, the old agreements you could hear in the way the carousel song fit between the crash of waves. When the freezers failed and the ledgers vanished, I took the bell and the lantern and kept the walking routes alive so the town would not go empty in its heart. Scooby tilts his head and soft-woos a thought about Alma at the key house, and the photograph with the creamery doors open. The bell ringer nods. Alma remembers without demanding to know. That helps more than questions sometimes. A faint tremolo threads the air. At first it might be machinery. Then it is music. From somewhere above, the carousel begins to find its song again, a few hesitant notes. Then a phrase, thin but true. The bell ringer hears it and closes their eyes for one long breath. The deliveries are working, Daphne says, and the words land warmly on the shelves. They carry parcels up a stair that rises at the back of the storeroom and ends behind a panel in the carousel pavilion. The fog has thinned, taking on a pearly light. Horses stand in their painted dreams. A swan boat gleams faintly. The calliope breathes and offers another shy tune. Velma touches the casing and finds a replaced reed, freshly oiled, done by a hand that understands brass. They place the bearings by the gear housing with a note that says for smoother circles. They tuck a paper cone beside the ticket booth with a promise to return with sugar when the machines are ready for sweetness again. The bell ringer sets the lantern on a post and listens to the pavilion hold the sound of their footsteps like a seashell holds the sea. Scooby rests his head against the swan and sighs. Shaggy leans beside him. The music grows a shade fuller. Fred marks the pavilion on the ledger with a check and a small star. Daphne ties a ribbon she found in her pocket to a pole where children once placed their hands to catch the brass ring. Velma writes one line in her notes. When you feed a place, it hums. They return to the corridor. The bell ringer lifts the ledger pen and completes the carousel entry in that same tidy hand. One delivery remains for morning, the lighthouse closet at the bluff. The lantern's bell taps the hook once, approving. They leave the creamery as the first soft gray of day presses on the windows. Alma waits at the inn doorway with a tray of bowls and porridge that smells of cinnamon and rest. She sees the lantern halo following them and the ease in their shoulders, and she understands more than any words could carry. Around the parlor table, they eat and whisper plans. The lighthouse road will be quiet. The fog will thin by the time they reach the steps. The bell ringer will meet them at the path where the grass bends. Scooby licks the last sweet scrape from his spoon and sets it carefully down, a small full stop at the end of a gentle sentence. The mantel clock clears its throat and offers the hour. Outside, gulls begin their low morning talk. The sea turns a shade paler as if rolling over to its other side. Velma closes her eyes for a moment and hears again the calliope's hesitant phrase, finding itself. She opens them to the faces around the table, all bright in the quiet way. Room 13 is not a door, she writes before they rise. It is a promise to notice what is needed and bring it again and again. Morning lifts slowly like a curtain that likes to linger. The road to the bluff is narrow and kind, bordered by grasses that bend as if listening. The mystery machine hums in a contented way. Scooby rides with his chin on the window ledge, nose working at the mix of salt, damp stone, and old rope. Shaggy counts the steps on the lighthouse sketch Velma drew, then laughs softly at himself and takes another sip of cocoa. Fred drives with a steady hand. Daphne ties her hair with a ribbon in the color of sea glass. Velma rests the ledger on her knees and traces the root with her finger, the way you trace a favorite melody. At the foot of the bluff, a path curls upward in gentle loops. The bell ringer waits where the grass frays into sand, lantern in one hand, the other resting on the brass tag tucked against the coat. A nod passes between everyone. No hurry in it. The sea breathes in and out. The fog hangs back now, thin and pearly, like lace on the horizon. They climb together. The lighthouse rises above them, made of stone and patience. Inside, the spiral stair is cool underfoot, the walls smelling faintly of lime and lantern smoke. Scooby's claws make a polite tick-tick that echoes just enough to sound like company. At a landing halfway up, a small door waits, plain and useful. The pelican crest sits above the latch, softened by years of touch. The number 13 is stamped near the hinge as if someone wanted the door to feel included. Velma opens the closet. Shelves greet them like faithful friends, wicks wrapped in paper, a tin of graphite for gears, a bottle of clear oil that catches the light and turns it warm. A folded note rests on top of a parcel. Fred lifts it carefully and reads in a voice no louder than a breath. For when the wind worries the light, signed with a single initial shaped like a keel. The bell ringer places the ledger on a shelf and writes lighthouse closet, replenished, then adds a tiny mark that looks like a bell. Daphne unwraps the wicks and lines them in a neat row as if tucking small children into bed. Shaggy and Scooby carry the oil up the next twist of steps, walking like waiters who love their trays. Velma slips graphite into a pocket and follows. At the lantern room, glass surrounds them, bright but gentle, like standing inside a clear heart. The lens waits, prismatic and still. You can hear it wanting to move the way you can hear a clock wanting to tick when it's freshly wound. Fred finds the gear housing and turns the key until the mechanism hums. Velma leans in with the graphite and whispers it into the teeth of the gears. Daphne wipes a soft cloth along the brass, and the brass shines back without pride, just glad to be seen. The bell ringer checks the wick assembly as if reading a familiar book, then nods and sets a new wick in place. A small flame is struck and settles, steady and calm. It is not a shout, only a promise. The lens turns. The beam walks the morning like a polite guardian taking its rounds. Down below, the fog sees the light and smiles, thinning a shade more. Scooby presses his nose to a panel and sneezes once. Behind the panel, a hollow answers, a little echo that doesn't belong to the stair. Velma tilts her head, listens, then finds a seam with her fingertips. There's a small latch hidden like a secret letter. She lifts it. The panel eases open. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, rests 3 ledgers stacked like sleeping books. The top one bears the pelican crest and a date from the winter. Everything stopped. Daphne draws in a quiet breath. Fred lifts the bundle out and sets it on a crate. Velma unties the twine and opens to a page where tidy ink lists everything the creamery sent and received, along with notes in the margin. Room 13 makes sure the carousel boys eat on late nights. Room 13 warms the lightkeeper's hands when the wind blows east. Room 13 sends cocoa to the Marsh Co-op when the harvest runs thin. The words are simple and full. The bell ringer's eyes soften. Someone hid these to keep an argument from tearing the town. When the freezers failed, there were voices that said, "Close the books and forget the old circuits." Someone else said, "Keep the promise going quietly." The panel closes, the light keeps turning, and the town forgets with less hurt. Scooby noses another envelope at the bottom of the compartment. On it, in pencil, is a name. Alma. Velma opens it with care. Inside, a photograph shows Alma younger, hair still gray but braided with a ribbon, standing beside a woman with laughter lines and a pelican pin. On the back, a message in the same tidy hand. "If the books go missing, follow the bell. Feed the corners until I'm back, or until you don't need me." The initials match the keel-shaped letter. A.R. Alma Rosedale's aunt, the one in the creamery photo, a seam running through all the quiet work. They stand in the lantern room and let the beam pass over their faces one by one. It feels like being counted kindly in a roll call you want to answer. Shaggy leans on the railing, easy in the knees. Scooby rests his chin on the sill and watches gulls float on air currents like folded notes delivered by the wind. Velma closes the recovered ledger and holds it to her chest for a moment. It feels like returning a found thing to a pocket it knows. Then she sets it with the others on the crate and writes in her own book. When you rescue a record, a place remembers how to speak. They carry the ledgers down, careful on the spiral, and pause again at the closet to leave a copy of today's entry, pinned with a brass tack. The bell ringer's lantern chimes once against its hook, a satisfied sound. Outside, the day has taken on a pale gold along the edges. The sea wears it well. The path down the bluff feels like a story that ends in a promise instead of a period. At the base, the mystery machine waits with its doors open, like welcoming arms. Alma is on the boardwalk when they return, a thermos in one hand, a folded sweater in the other. She sees the ledgers and her eyes become the softest kind of bright. She does not cry. She presses her lips together as if to keep a thank you from spilling out too fast, then opens them slowly and says it once, like a bell note. "Thank you." They lay the ledgers on the inn's counter, and Alma turns pages the way you turn a beloved friend's face back toward the light. She taps lines now and then and nods to herself. "The town will feel this," she says. "You will hear it." As if on cue, faint music floats up from the boardwalk pavilion. The carousel tries another phrase, truer now, rounder. "The Marsh Road will want its delivery next," Velma says. The Cranberry Co-op has a line in the ledger and a note about thin harvests when fog lingers too long. Shaggy packs baskets with jars of jam, fresh paper, and a small sack of flour, Alma adds with a smile. Scooby tests a ribbon of twine between his teeth and decides it will hold. Fred checks the route. Daphne tucks the photograph of Alma and the woman with the pelican pin into a sleeve to bring back later in a frame. They step into the soft afternoon that feels like a deep breath held and let go. The bell ringer takes the lead along the marsh road, lantern steady even in daylight, as if the light is not for seeing, but for being seen by the places that need to feel remembered. Afternoon settles soft and low as they follow the lane that wanders toward the marsh. Grasses trade secrets with the wind. Egrets stand like folded paper along the ditches. The bell ringer walks ahead with the lantern hanging easy at the side, its bell giving a small hush of a tap now and then that seems to keep everyone in step. The Cranberry Co-op appears as a scatter of cedar buildings perched on planks above shallow water. Sunlight lies across the bogs in long ribbons. The berries float in quiet constellations, tiny stars gathered by wooden booms that drift without hurry. A weathered sign with a pelican crest leans by the door. Someone has rubbed it clean with the heel of a hand, and it shines a little under the dust. Velma checks the ledger. Delivery for the co-op. Paper for labels. Flour for the kitchen. Jam jars for the shelf with the painted geese. She smiles at the details and runs her finger under each line with the pleasure of a list that wants to be completed. They step onto the walkway. The boards answer with a slow, hollow music that sounds like a kind drum. Scooby lowers his nose and draws in marsh air, green and sweet and honest. Shaggy balances a crate on his hip and hums the melody the carousel tried that morning. Daphne carries the sack of flour the way you carry a sleeping cat. Fred holds the box of jars against his chest, firm but gentle. Inside the main room, light filters through wide windows and turns the dust to soft gold. A woman in a canvas apron looks up from a scale. Her hair is the color of driftwood and pulled into a knot that means she likes to get things done. Her name tag reads Mabel in faded letters. Her eyes hold both the sun and the shadow of a long season. When she sees the pelican crest on the ledger in Velma's hands, the shadow lifts. We thought the deliveries were just stories the marsh told itself to feel brave, Mabel says, voice warm as a stovetop. The bell ringer gives a nod that says, stories can be true without needing to be loud. They set the crate of jars on the counter. Daphne counts softly, each jar a clear bell of its own. Velma places the ream of paper beside a stamp block carved with the pelican crest. Fred ties the sack of flour shut again with a tidy twist. Shaggy and Scooby peek toward the kitchen when a scent like cinnamon and orange peel drifts through. Mabel catches them and laughs without a sharp edge. There is bread cooling, she says. There is always bread when the marsh has a good day. Outside, a pump coughs once and falls quiet. Mabel's laugh curls back into her chest. Sluice gate sticks, she says. Belt slips. We coax, and it forgets. Then we coax again. Fred looks toward the shed by the channel where water waits, polite and patient, to be invited through. The bell ringer's lantern rings once, a small note of agreement. They walk to the shed. Inside, the air smells of wet cedar and old rope. A wide leather belt hangs loosened from a pulley, tired from a long morning of pretending to be stronger than it feels. Velma kneels and runs a fingertip along the belt's edge. Cracked but willing, she murmurs, like a sentence that needs one more word to make sense. Scooby noses a crate and finds a tin of saddle soap and a spool of twine. Daphne brings a clean rag from her pocket the way some people bring handkerchiefs to dances. Fred repositions the belt, true on the wheel, and Velma brushes the leather with the soap until it drinks and softens. Shaggy holds the pulley steady with both hands and the calm of someone who knows the value of slow. They work without talking much. The marsh listens and lends its quiet. When they are ready, Fred nods to Velma. She turns the handle. The belt grips and goes with a grateful sigh. The sluice gate shivers, then moves, then settles into a steady pace. Outside, water begins to slip through the channel like a relieved thought. The floating berries gather themselves into closer circles, tidying their stars. Mabel watches from the doorway with her hand at her throat like a person who hears a beloved voice return after a long absence. She does not clap. She says thank you once, and the word lands on the water and widens. They return to the main room. Mabel sets out thick slices of cranberry bread on a wide plate lined with a towel. The bread is still warm. The butter shines like small morning. Shaggy and Scooby sit on stools that wobble a little and hold their plates the way you hold gifts before you open them. Scooby takes a bite and closes his eyes. Ugh. He cannot help the small sound that escapes. Mabel laughs again, and this time It lands in the rafters and stays. Velma opens the ledger to the co-op page. She adds a note in careful ink. Belt cleaned and set. Gate eased. Paper in jars delivered. Marsh spirits lifted, then underlines it once as if to make sure the line holds. The bell ringer leans the lantern against a post and writes their tidy mark beside the entry. The bell touches the hook and gives a pleased tap. Daphne wanders to a shelf of old photographs. Marsh workers stand chest-deep in water, rakes over their shoulders, faces lined with the kind of work that knows it matters. In one picture, a younger Mabel stands beside Alma's aunt, both in rubber boots, both laughing while a dog stands on a crate, as if in command. Daphne brings the photo to Mabel. That dog loved a bell, Mabel says, and would sleep beside it like a friend. Fred steps outside to breathe the easy air. From the direction of town, a strand of music floats thin and true. The carousel has found another piece of its own song. He smiles and looks toward the lighthouse, where the lens turns with the patience of a heart that knows its purpose. The town is humming in more places now. Scooby wanders the back porch and discovers a crate marked with the pelican crest and the number 13. Inside are small things collected without fuss, spare gloves, a coil of line, 2 thermoses wrapped in clean cloth that smell faintly of chocolate. A card lies on top with a familiar tidy script. For long afternoons when the pump remembers and the hands forget they are tired. Signed with the keel-shaped initial. Mabel lifts one thermos and pours cocoa into enamel cups that show their chips like old medals. She pours extra for Scooby. He licks a speck from his whiskers and sits up straighter, suddenly noble. Shaggy bows without leaving the stool. Velma draws a small pelican in the corner of her notes and gives it a crown made of 3 cranberries. The sun drifts lower, painting the bogs in a glow that feels like a soft blanket. The bell ringer closes the co-op door with a touch that says, "See you tomorrow." Mabel walks them to the lane and presses a paper sack into Daphne's hands. "Cranberry scones for later," she says. "Alma likes them. Tell her the pump sings again." Daphne promises and tucks the sack into a safe place under her arm. They return along the marsh road. The egrets have moved to new posts, white commas in the sentence of the day. The mystery machine purrs under a sky deepening to blue-gray. Scooby rests his chin on the dash. Shaggy counts bog houses and stops because counting feels like work, and today wants only easy things. Back at the key house, Alma stands on the porch with the door open and the parlor lamps glowing. She hears the humming and the way the town holds the air and nods before they say a word. Mabel's scones go to the kitchen. The ledgers return to the counter like birds to a branch they trust. Alma brushes a crumb from the cover and places a ribbon between today's pages. They sit together as evening lies down around them. Fred sketches the co-op pump with tidy labels and a note for spare belt oil. Daphne frames the photograph of Alma's aunt and Mabel and the bossy dog, tucking it beside the mantel clock. Shaggy and Scooby open the paper sack and divide a scone with the ceremony of a holiday. Velma writes one line she has been saving. "A town rests when its corners are fed." The bell ringer stands and lifts the lantern. "One delivery remains," Alma says quietly, and her eyes go to the boardwalk, as if watching memory walk there. The carousel will want company when the lamps are lit. The night will listen, and the song will remember the parts it forgot. Scooby yawns and settles against Shaggy's shoulder. The mantel clock offers a low, friendly chime. Outside, the sea leans in, the way good listeners do. The bell on the lantern answers with a small note that feels like a hand on a doorknob, ready. Evening gathers like a shawl as they step onto the boardwalk. Lamps blink awake one by one, small islands of warmth in the blue. The carousel pavilion holds its own light inside, a pearly glow that spills through the slats and paints the planks with stripes. From within comes the hush of a mechanism thinking about music. The bell ringer lifts the lantern to the doorway and rests it on a post. The bell touches the hook and gives a single soft tap. Scooby's ears tip toward the sound. Shaggy pats his shoulder. We'll go easy. Like always. Fred nods and sets the toolkit near the gear housing. Daphne smooths the ribbon she tied earlier to the ring pole. It flutters once like a hello. Velma opens the ledger to the carousel page and reads the note from the morning. Bearings placed. Cones promised. Song returning. They move around the platform with the patient grace of friends tidying a room together. Fred kneels by the drive and listens with his hands, feeling the faint unevenness he marked in the sketch at the inn. He loosens a plate, adjusts the bearings they delivered, and tightens the bolts until the sound evens like a breath that has found the right pace. Velma traces the calliope pipes with her fingertip. Finding one whose seam is a whisper off, she eases it true. Daphne polishes a brass escutcheon, and the scrollwork brightens as if it wanted to be seen again. Scooby pads from horse to horse, offering each a solemn nod. He pauses at the swan boat and rests his chin on its smooth neck, then gives a small wag. Shaggy unfolds a napkin with 2 cranberry scones and places one on the ticket counter for later, the way you leave a note that says, "Thinking of you." A hush settles deeper. Then a tentative phrase rises from the calliope. 3 notes that reach for each other and almost meet. Velma adjusts one more read. The 4th note arrives and takes its place. Fred lets the platform turn a few inches and stops it, then starts it again, a gentle practice of circles. The horses accept. The mirrors catch the lamp glow and fold it back into the pavilion. From the far edge of the boardwalk, footsteps pause. Alma stands just outside the light, sweater around her shoulders, smile like a lantern turned low. Behind her, Mabel from the marsh rests both palms on the railing, eyes bright in the easy way of someone who has worked all day and found energy left for joy. The lighthouse beam steps across the sky and touches the pavilion once, as if in greeting. The bell ringer watches the room the way caretakers watch a child take its first steady steps. A hand goes to the pelican crest on the central column, a thumb rubbing the brass smooth where many thumbs have done the same. Velma glances at the ledger and writes a single word under the day's line. Tuning. Shaggy feeds a nickel into the old ticket slot just to be polite. A lever clicks, a faint light winks, and the calliope inhales. Music begins, not loud, not showy. A round, lulling tune that remembers the way to fold itself around the room. The platform turns. Painted horses wake without leaving their dreams. The swan slides, proud and kind. Scooby steps onto the swan's little deck and sits, paws tucked, captain of quiet waters. Shaggy climbs in behind him, hat tipped back, grin soft. Daphne walks beside a chestnut mare and trails her fingers along the carved mane. Fred paces the edge, eyes on the gear and the floorboards, satisfied at the steady. Velma closes her eyes and hears how the notes fit the beams in the air and the night beyond. A song shaped exactly to this place. A small click sounds near the ticket booth, then another. Velma opens her eyes and follows it. Inside the booth, behind the stamp pad and the drawer for rings, a narrow panel hides a set of switches labeled in tidy hand. Lights, fuse, calliope air. In the margin, a penciled note. When the wind is from the east, set 2 down, 1 up. When it's from the west, listen. Velma smiles. Someone taught the room to be its own weather vane. On the counter sits a brass ring in a shallow dish. The dish is stamped with the pelican crest and the number 13. Daphne picks up the ring and feels the warmth of polished metal that has met many hands. She sets it back and turns the dish so the crest faces the room. "Welcome home," she whispers, and the music braids a harmony through the next phrase as if it heard. They let the song play the length of a slow circle, then two, then three. Outside, a few townsfolk drift closer on bare feet or soft shoes, drawn by the melody that used to tuck whole summers into their pockets. No one crowd, no one cheer. They lean on railings and on each other and let their shoulders drop. Alma steps to the bell ringer and touches the lantern's handle. The bell answers with a glow more than a sound. Alma looks to the gang. "It was quiet too long," she says, and the relief in her voice smooths the last rough places in the room. Fred eases the platform to stillness. Velma closes the calliope's lid halfway, the way you dim a lamp rather than snuff it. Daphne ties a clean ribbon to the booth window and writes a small sign on brown paper in careful hand. "Tomorrow at dusk, one song for anyone who wants to stand and listen. Bring the day you had, and let it rest here." She tapes it inside the glass. Shaggy offers the second scone to Alma, who breaks it in two and gives half to the bell ringer without looking away. The practiced gesture of people who have shared small strength many nights. Scooby hops down from the swan and shakes once, just enough to fluff. He pads to Velma and rests his head against her knee. "Ruh," he says, which means this place is ready to sleep. They tidy tools, coil cords, tuck the ledger into its place beneath the counter where the ring dish keeps watch. Fred does one last walk around, the steady captain. Daphne touches the swan's bow and the mare's cheek. Velma listens to the air and hears no more out of true. Shaggy collects the napkin and folds it neat, because neat feels right tonight. Scooby carries the empty paper cup and drops it into the little bin, pleased with himself. The bell ringer lifts the lantern. The bell taps the hook, a soft closing note. Outside, the boardwalk breathes. The sea answers with a slow hush that reaches all the way to the dunes. The lighthouse beam turns and turns. They step into the night together. Behind them, the carousel holds its calm like a candle under glass. Ahead, the key house windows glow. Alma leads, Mabel beside her. The townsfolk drift away in pairs and trios, not talking much, the sort of quiet that says tomorrow will feel easier. In the parlor, mugs appear. The map comes out. Velma places her notebook on the table and, without sitting, writes one clean line to end the page. When a song returns, a town remembers how to breathe. Alma looks at the bell ringer. "Stay a moment," she says gently. "There is one more thing to set right, and it belongs to you." Scooby's ears lift. Shaggy tilts his head. Fred and Daphne trade a look that is both question and yes. Velma closes her notebook and rests her palm on it, ready. Night deepens around the key house, kind and unhurried. In the parlor, lamplight smooths every edge. The ledgers rest on the counter with a ribbon between today's pages. The brass tag marked 13 lies beside them, warm from many hands. Alma stands by the mantel clock and waits until the room settles, then looks to the bell ringer. "There is one more thing to return," she says, voice low as surf under stars. "It belongs to you." From a drawer, she lifts a small wooden box rubbed satin by years of opening. Inside, on a square of blue cloth, lies a pelican pin and a narrow strip of brass stamped with a keel-shaped initial. Alma takes the pin in her palm, then the brass strip, and carries them as if they might fly away if hurried. She faces the bell ringer and smiles the way you smile at someone who has walked a long road without asking for applause. "My aunt started a root," Alma says. "You kept it breathing. The pin kept the promise in our family. The work kept it in yours." She pins the pelican to the bell ringer's coat and slides the little brass initial onto the lantern's hook. The bell touches it and answers with a small, round note. Scooby noses the brass tag on the counter, picks it up carefully, pads across the rug, and lifts it toward the lantern. The bell ringer bends, eyes level with his, and accepts the tag from his mouth with both hands, a gesture as formal as any ceremony needs to be. The tag hangs below the bell and turns once, slow as a planet, then settles. Shaggy exhales like a tire finding the right pressure. Fred stands a little straighter, something satisfied in his shoulders. Daphne's ribbon at the carousel pole has a twin tied to the lantern now, neat and bright. Velma writes a line and closes her notebook as if tucking a song into a pocket for later. Mabel comes from the doorway with a plate of honeyed cranberries and slices of soft cheese. She sets it on the table, gives Scooby the side eye that means patience first, then nods permission. Scooby takes one ruby berry and chews thoughtfully, eyes half closing. He leans against Shaggy, who has already tasted the cheese and decided the night has reached its perfect temperature. The bell ringer takes off the hat. The room sees a face lined with good work and night air, steady eyes that count by kindness, and a mouth that prefers yes. The name arrives simple as a hand offered. Rowan. Alma says it once and lets it live in the space. The name folds itself into the parlor like it was always there. Rowan turns the lantern down a shade. The room answers with its own glow, as if to say, we can carry light too. On the map, Fred draws a soft circle around the places they have fed, and dots a path between them, a necklace of small, bright beads. Daphne frames the letter to Alma in a glass front from the office and stands it beside the ledgers so the keel initial can keep watch. Velma places the photograph of Alma's aunt and Mabel and the bossy dog where morning will find it. Alma pours tea. Rowan lifts the cup with both hands. Thank you, they say. But the thank you lands in many directions at once. To Alma, who kept a door open. To Mabel, who kept the kitchen warm. To the gang who tuned gears and songs. To the town that remembered how to hum. The bell on the lantern gives a tiny breath of a ring, a note you feel more than hear. Beyond the porch, distant music threads the dark, a single verse the carousel practices for tomorrow's dusk. The lighthouse sends a beam across the low clouds, and the clouds send it back softer. The marsh sighs and shifts as water finds its places. The creamery rests without the strain of holding too much silence. Scooby's eyes grow heavy. He climbs under the couch, turns twice like a small storm becoming weather, and curls with his chin on Shaggy's knee. Shaggy pats his ears and lets his own lids drift. Fred covers them both with a light blanket folded from the back of the chair. Daphne gathers cups and sets them in the kitchen where morning will know what to do. Velma writes one last line on a clean page and leaves the book open so the ink can dry. Room 13 is not a room. It is the town's way of saying, we see you. Rowan sets the lantern on the counter near the ledgers. The pelican pin catches the lamp and shines, not bright, just sure. Alma winds the mantel clock 2 turns and listens to the tick resume, a heartbeat the house understands. Mabel closes the curtains halfway to tell the windows that night is welcome. They speak a little about tomorrow. Rowan will walk the pier at dawn to leave a note for anyone who still listens by the rails. Alma will send a letter to workers who moved away, telling them they have a song to come back to. Mabel will bring jars labeled with clean new paper. The gang will stop by the lighthouse once more to check the wick and then roll on, the way travelers do when a place has taught them what it needed to teach. Scooby slips all the way under, one paw twitching as if catching a brass ring in a dream. Shaggy's breathing matches the mantel clock for a while, then drifts just a touch behind, making a lazy harmony. Fred closes his eyes with the expression of someone who has put every tool back in its place. Daphne leans her head against the side of the chair and goes quiet, the way a candle does when a window is shut, and the room keeps its warmth. Velma watches the lantern's bell until her own thoughts slow to the pace of its tiny sway, then rests her cheek on her notebook and lets the world keep turning without her help for a while. Alma lowers the lamp wick. Rowan lifts the brass tag 13 with 2 fingers and lays it against the lantern so it will not clink when the wind thinks about coming in. Mabel sets a plate cover over the honeyed berries so sweetness will wait until morning. The parlor breathes. The house breathes. The town breathes. Outside, the sea takes a long, even pull and lets it go without hurry. Somewhere on the boardwalk, a sign settles against its hooks and is content. The carousel sleeps with the tune cupped in both hands. The lighthouse turns and never asks for thanks. When morning opens its eyes, there will be cocoa and scones and a path down to Fenwick Pier where a bell will count steps again, not to call for help, but to keep a promise. For now, the mystery machine and its friends rest in the fold of a town that fed its corners back to life. Scooby sighs, deep and happy. The bell under the pelican pin gives the faintest answer, a yes you can take with you and follow back whenever you wish. Now let's move to Johnny Bravo. Night sits easy over Aaron City. Streetlights wear soft halos. In Bunny Bravo's kitchen, the clock ticks like a cat's tail. Johnny leans on the counter with a glass of milk and a grin he keeps polished even when no one's looking. He flexes once at the refrigerator door for practice, then stops because a sound is drifting down the hallway that is not the clock and not the hum of the fridge. It is a song, thin and sweet, the ghost of a slow tune threading the air the way steam curls out of a kettle. Mama calls from the living room in a voice that could soothe a thunderstorm. "Do you hear that, baby?" Johnny tilts his head. The tune seems to come from the attic, from a cardboard box that still smells like old Sundays. He and Mama follow the music up creaking steps, one light bulb swinging like a lazy moon. Little Susie appears at the bottom of the ladder with a flyer in both hands, careful as if she is holding a butterfly. Starline Community Center closing this weekend, she reads. Big sale, old equipment, jukebox included. Johnny blinks at the flyer and then at the dusty box in front of him. Inside sits a stack of vinyl sleeves with corners softened by time. On top, a photograph. Bunny. In a polka dot dress by a shining jukebox, a hand on the chrome, laughter caught in the frieze like a bright bubble. "That is the Starline box," Mama says, and her smile turns a shade of remembering. "We used to slow dance on Thursday nights until the whole neighborhood breathed better on Fridays." The thin tune in the air is real now, not memory. It is the record player in the corner, somehow switched on by a bump of Johnny's elbow. The needle rides a groove and finds a gentle melody that knows how to hold a room without crowding it. Johnny does a tiny shoulder shimmy that would never admit it is a dance, then clears his throat and points at the flyer. "Susie, kid, we are going to save a jukebox." He tries to make the words sound like hero business. They come out like a promise. Carl slides in the back door with his backpack full of gears and big ideas. He has a screwdriver in his pocket and optimism in his eyes. He hears the tune, sees the photo, reads the flyer, and nods as if the city itself just handed him homework he actually wants to do. The mystery machine is someone else's ride, but Carl's hatchback is ready, so they pile in with Mama's permission and a Tupperware of sandwiches for courage. Aaron City, after dark, is kind if you treat it that way. Pop's Diner glows on the corner. Coffee warm as a blanket, neon sign purring like a tired cat. Johnny pushes through the door without swagger for once. He is carrying a photograph and a feeling, and both make his shoulders behave. At the counter, Pops wipes a circle on the chrome and nods. The song on the house jukebox keeps missing its last note, he says, tapping the side with 2 fingers. Things slip when no one listens close. Johnny studies the back of the Starline photo and finds a name scribbled there in Bunny's younger hand. Mrs. Delaney, Starline director. Thursdays are for slow songs. Pops nods toward the window where fog curls low along the curb like a friendly dog. Starline sits 3 blocks down, he says. Lights off, but the side door sticks and then goes. Tell Mrs. Delaney I still owe her nickels for 6 summers. They walk the street together the way good friends do when night is quiet. Susie counts lampposts until counting turns to humming. Carl checks a list he is building in his head. Johnny adjusts his hair even though the wind is polite. At the corner, a mural of a dancer lifts a painted hand toward a painted jukebox. The paint is flaking, but the gesture is still there, and it makes all of them smile. The Starline Community Center is a brick building that knows how to stand steady. Its side door complains and then allows them in. The gym floor carries the varnish of many summers. The stage at the far end holds a curtain that droops like a tired eyelid. In the rec room, under a dust sheet, waits a jukebox shaped like a promise. Johnny lifts the sheet. Chrome winks. The title cards behind the glass list old favorites in tidy lines. A coin slot asks for 10 cents and patience. Mrs. Delaney arrives out of the hallway's hush with a ring of keys and a cardigan that looks like it knows every song. She sees Bunny's boy and Susie and Carl, and she sees the photograph in Johnny's hand. She does not ask questions with hard edges. She says, I was wondering when you'd come, and hands Johnny a cloth to polish the glass as if she is giving him a piece of the room to care for. Carl kneels to open the service panel. Inside, belts sag like overcooked noodles. A fuse stares back with the wounded pride of something that tried and failed. A dust bunny the size of a raccoon lifts into the air and decides to be less. Susie climbs onto a stool and reads the titles aloud with awe. Velvet Avenue Waltz, Last Bus Home, The Sensitive Male. Johnny startles at that last one and coughs to cover it, then points very seriously at a small brass token taped inside the door. That token, Mrs. Delaney says, is the Starline nickel. It is not worth money. It is worth remembering what we promised each other when things were easier. Mama arrives with a thermos and the kind of hug you hand out in cups. She looks at the jukebox like a friend who stayed at the party to help clean up. Johnny stands a little taller. Mrs. Delaney sets a clipboard on the table and writes what the room needs in square letters. Belt for the carriage, bulbs for the crown, oil for the selector, cards for new song titles, so the kids can see themselves in the glass too. Carl taps each line and nods. Johnny taps the last one and nods harder. They decide to work the night in 4 small chapters. First, listening, then cleaning, then fixing, then a test song. You do not rush a room that held generations of Thursday nights. Johnny leans close to the chrome and sees his own face and his mother's reflected there. Susie's ribbon, Carl's round glasses. He does not make a joke. He just breathes and the room breathes with him. They push open windows. They sweep. They set the title cards in neat rows and leave blank spaces where new songs will go. Susie draws a tiny star on an index card and writes Slow Groove Hour beside it in clear kid printing. Mrs. Delaney folds a towel and polishes the coin slot until it gleams. Carl hands Johnny the soft brush, and Johnny, muscles made for showing off, learns the delicate pressure that cleans without scratching. When they pause, the building relaxes around them. The gym murmurs. The stage curtain lifts a little. Somewhere a vending machine remembers it used to hum. Johnny hears it too and smiles to himself, small and honest. He looks at the brass token and then at the photograph and then at the door where the city waits to feel lighter. Mama checks her watch and pours cocoa into paper cups. She says, "We slow the night, and the night slows us." Susie toasts with her cup like a mayor at a ribbon cutting. Carl adjusts his list. Mrs. Delaney presses the star line token into Johnny's palm. He does not close his fist around it. He lays it on the cloth beside the screwdriver and the new bulbs and lets it shine. They are ready for the next chapter. The jukebox has been listened to. It has been seen. It is time to bring back the pieces that slipped. Johnny rolls his shoulders once like a swimmer before a calm lake. He nods to Carl. He nods to Mrs. Delaney. He nods to Mama and Susie and to the city leaning against the windows to watch. And they begin with listening the way good mechanics and good friends do. Mrs. Delaney opens a small metal drawer on the back of the jukebox and brings out a folded maintenance card written in tidy blue ink from years ago. It lists 3 gentle rules: dust first, oil second, patience always. Johnny reads it once, nods like it was written just for him, and sets the card on the table where the lamp can keep it company. Carl unrolls a cloth wrap full of tools that look eager to help. He lifts the back panel and the machine shows its quiet heart. The turntable waits. The selector arm hovers. The carriage belt droops like a sleepy smile. Susie holds a flashlight steady so the light does not wobble. Mama ties her hair back and hands out soft brushes. Mrs. Delaney brings a jar with a label that says "Nickels for Thursdays" and sets it down as if placing a candle in a window. Dusting becomes a rhythm. Carl brushes along the selector pins. Velveteen fuzz gives way to metal that catches the lamp and returns it shyly. Johnny covers the chrome with his palm and wipes in slow circles until his reflection is less a pose and more a person. Susie reads title cards out loud to keep them company. Velvet Avenue Waltz, Last Bus Home, Moonlight on Maple Drive, The Sensitive Male. Johnny coughs as if the air was dry. Susie grins without saying a word. The belt will not pretend any longer. It is cracked along the edge where work once lived. Carl measures its path with a loop of twine. He marks the twine, then drops it into his pocket like a promise. "Pops might have something," he says. Mrs. Delaney nods toward the side door. "The Star Line does not mind a short errand if you bring the night back with you." They walk the 3 blocks in a small parade of purpose. Streetlights lean in kindly. A bus sighs at a stop and pulls away. At Pop's diner, the bell over the door gives a sleepy jingle. Pops looks up, sees the twine in Carl's hand, and reaches under the counter without a speech. He sets down a belt salvaged from an old milkshake mixer and another from a retired vending machine. "Try the vending one first," he says. "It forgives." He adds a tiny brush the size of a sparrow's tail and slides over a paper sack. "Sugar for the brave." He glances at Johnny and taps the flyer Susie carries. "You get that jukebox singing and I will pay my tab in nickels till spring." Back at Star Line, the building seems to exhale when the door swings open. The jukebox waits exactly where they left it, patient as a dog who trusts you will return. Carl fits the vending belt around the wheels with fingers that know when to insist and when to encourage. Johnny steadies the cage with a hand that has learned to use a gentle grip. The belt settles. Carl presses once along its length. "Good," he murmurs. It listens. They change bulbs in the crown. Daphne-style neatness borrowed from the quiet memory of their friends. New glass takes the current and glows, not a glare, more a soft halo that turns chrome into honey. Mama polishes the title window until the letters look freshly written. Mrs. Delaney oils the selector track with 3 patient drops and wipes the extra away because machines, like people, work better when they are not carrying more than they need. Susie draws a clean card and prints a new title in careful letters for later. Thursday Slow Song. She slides it at the end of the row and leaves the slot empty on purpose. A promise needs space. They're ready to try. Mrs. Delaney brings the Starline token from the door pocket. It shines without showing off. She lays it in Johnny's palm. He breathes once and feeds it into the coin slot. The mechanism wakes with a small, thoughtful click. Lights along the selector wink in a line. Carl chooses Velvet Avenue Waltz, a Bunny favorite written in the margin of the old photo. The selector arm slides. The carriage moves. The record lifts from its sleeve and travels to the turntable with the care of a hand passing a sleeping child. The motor hums. The record turns. The needle settles. Music arrives like someone opening a window in it. One measure glides, then a second, and Johnny can feel the room smiling. On the third, the platter wobbles, and the song dips a little. Carl lifts his hand. "Stop there," he says gently. He rocks the platter and feels the play in a mount that should be still. Mama brings the little wrench. Johnny tightens each mount in a star pattern the way Carl shows him. Not muscle, memory. The screws answer and hold. They try again. This time the waltz comes round and stays round. The bass line is a cat at the foot of the bed. The melody is a ribbon over warm air. Mrs. Delaney sets one hand on the jukebox glass. Her shoulders let go of 2 long days at once. Susie reaches up and takes Johnny's sleeve. "Dance with the room," she says. Johnny does not argue. He just shifts his weight and lets the 3-beat count find his feet. Mama watches with a smile that has a past and a future in it. They let the song play until the crown bulbs feel like stars. Then they press stop because too much glow at once makes morning feel far away. Carl opens the back and listens a final time. The belt stays true. The motor breathes evenly. The selector rests without twitching. He writes a note in the maintenance card. New belt. Mount snug. Crown bulbs replaced. Token mech smooth. Patience observed. Mrs. Delaney opens a shoebox where blank title slips live and hands them round. "Write one each for tomorrow," she says. "Something for now. Something for the kids who will come when they hear." Mama writes, "Bunny's Thursday" on pale blue. Johnny writes, "Hold the door" in blocky, careful print. Susie writes across the gym floor with 3 tiny stars. Carl writes, "After homework slow." Mrs. Delaney writes, "Neighborhood waltz," and underlines it once softly. They tidy tools and fold the dust sheet not over the jukebox but onto a chair beside it, because bed sheets do not belong on voices anymore. Carl closes the back panel with a little pat. Johnny stands with his hand on the glass and feels the hum still threaded in the chrome. The Starline token lies on the table between the lamp and the maintenance card. It belongs to the room again, and also to all of them. 1. Outside, Iron City turns 1 page darker. The community center signs creak a bit and then settle. Pops turns his diner sign to closed and leaves 1 booth light on out of habit. A bus heads toward the depot with 2 riders asleep, upright and safe. The night is gentle all the way through. Mrs. Delaney locks the door and tucks the keys into her sweater pocket. "Tomorrow," she says, "we invite the neighborhood for 1 hour before the salemen come. We will play the songs. We will tell them what this room remembers." She touches Johnny's elbow and adds in a voice that could steady ladders, "Bring your mother's photo. The jukebox likes to see old friends." Susie carries the paper sack of sugar like treasure. Mama gathers the cups. Carl rolls up his tools. Johnny takes the maintenance card and sets it upright on the jukebox ledge where the light can read it too. They step into the hallway. The gym echoes 1 soft shoe scuff, then quiets. The stage curtain lifts a finger's width as if to peek at the future. The door closes. Streetlight paints a neat rectangle on the floor and then steps away. Morning slips into Erin City like a polite guest, tapping softly on windows, waiting to be welcomed. Johnny wakes to the smell of toast and the sound of Mama humming a tune he half remembers from the photograph. Little Susie sits at the table with a stack of blank title cards and a purple pen, printing names like she's making invitations. Carl arrives with a shoebox labeled Spare Maybes, full of belts, bulbs, and hope. Mrs. Delaney phones to say the doors will open at 9 for one quiet hour before the salemen come with clipboards. They carry the Starline box, the photo of Bunny in her polka-dot dress, and the maintenance card back to the community center. The side door sighs and swings wide as if it slept well too. Johnny sets the photo on the counter beside the jukebox where the light can find it. Mama's hand rests on his shoulder for a beat that feels like a drum, keeping time for everything else. The room needs a few soft chores. Carl checks the carriage belt with a satisfied nod. Todd, Susie wipes each title window until it looks like new rain on glass. Johnny walks the gym, listening to the floorboards. Near center court, a board lifts by a whisper. He kneels, presses a palm, finds the nail that wants reminding, and tucks it home with the gentle insistence he learned last night. The board settles with a small, contented sound. Pops appears in the doorway with a brown bakery box and a roll of quarters wrapped in paper. He sets both down like offerings. "This is breakfast and ballast," he says. The nickel jar is short on nickels, but quarters break into them if you're patient. He tips 2 into the jar to show it can be done. The bell over the door gives a bright little jingle and keeps ringing as neighbors arrive, one by one, then in twos, then in a drift like leaves that know where they belong. Mrs. Delaney pulls the chain on the rec room lamp. The crown bulbs on the jukebox answer with a honey glow. She taps the maintenance card once, then faces the small gathering. "Before the salemen count things," she says, "we're going to count something different. We're going to let this room remember us, and let us remember it. Johnny, baby, you start us." Johnny's hand is steady as he takes the Starline token from the saucer. He feeds it into the slot, and it disappears with a good, clean click. He looks to Mama. She nods at the card she wrote in pale blue. Bunny's Thursday. Carl nudges toggle B2. Inside, the selector arm listens and moves. The record rises and lands. The platter turns. The first measure floats into the room, a slow ribbon across warm air. Shoulders drop. People let their bags hang from their wrists. Even the salemen at the doorway step back and lower their clipboards without quite knowing why. Mama doesn't dance so much as sway the way tall grass sways when it knows the wind by name. Mrs. Delaney slides one foot, then the other, and the cardigan moves like a small boat on gentle water. Susie counts waltz time in her head and draws stars on 2 more title cards. Carl watches the carriage track and smiles because it's running true. Then he lets his tools wait and simply listens like the rest. The song finishes and the crown bulbs blink once in a pleased way. A neighbor in a work jacket with a name stitched above the pocket, Eddie, asks if the machine takes modern titles too. Susie holds up her purple pen. "It takes handwriting," she says. "That's more modern than people think." He laughs and writes Saturday chores slow, then fishes in his pocket and places 3 nickels into the jar, each with a small thunk that sounds like "vote yes." 2 teenagers breeze in, sneakers quiet on the varnish. They stop in front of the glass, eyebrows rising like awnings. "Can we put ours in?" the taller one asks. Mrs. Delaney tilts her head toward the shoebox of blank cards. The girls confer, whispering smiles, then print one together. After practice 2-step. They set the card into a slot and grin at the sight of themselves reflected in chrome next to the old names that suddenly look like relatives. Pops opens the bakery box. Jelly donuts sit like rosy moons. He hands one to Johnny without comment. Johnny takes a bite, licks a line of powdered sugar from his thumb, and presses the heel of his palm to the glass again, because the machine hum is a feeling he likes now. He glances at the sailmen who are not writing, only watching, the way people watch a sunrise they didn't plan on catching. Mrs. Delaney leans to the microphone at the cashier window and doesn't switch it on because the room doesn't need amplifying. She says we'll play 4 songs, old, new, borrowed, blue. The crowd answers with a soft chuckle. For borrowed, Pop suggests the sensitive male with a wink in Johnny's direction. Johnny coughs, but the cough turns into a smile he cannot hide. Susie slides the card into position and pats it like a cat. Carl toggles the selection. The record lifts, lands, and the first bars arrive with a shy little grin of a melody. Johnny leans back, surprised to find the song sweeter than the joke he always made about it. Mama sets the photo of Bunny beside the window so the reflection shows her laughing by the jukebox again. Johnny's chest fills and empties like the bellows of a calliope in a faraway town, steady and kind. Between tracks, Eddie taps the floorboard Johnny fixed and nods approval. The teenagers practice a turn by the window and fail beautifully, dissolving into giggles and trying again slower. A retired teacher hums harmony under her breath. The sailmen exchange a look that says they might be late to wherever they were going next. That seems okay. For the blue song, Susie chooses a title card she wrote earlier, across the gym floor. Carl toggles, and the needle finds a small ache that doesn't hurt so much as loosen a knot somewhere behind everyone's ribs. People breathe deeper. Mrs. Delaney's hands rest flat on the glass, one on either side of Bunny's photograph, and she closes her eyes for just a measure, not more. When the 4th song ends, the room doesn't clap. It doesn't need to. Quarters become nickels. The jar fills. The sailmen finally step forward, hats in their hands. One clears his throat. "There's a paper on my clipboard," he says, that says, "This unit is surplus to community needs." He looks at the jar, the titles, the way the light from the crown catches in Mama's hair, and sets his clipboard face down on the counter. I think the paper may be wrong. Mrs. Delaney smiles a small, precise smile that has delayed bulldozers before. She says, "We'll talk with the city this afternoon. Right now, we'll write a receipt for these nickels." Pops pulls a pad from his pocket like a magic trick and starts tallying. Eddie offers his truck for moving anything that needs moving that is not leaving. The teenagers volunteer paint for the rec room. The retired teacher says she will teach a Thursday waltz, so the cards mean something in knees as well as letters. Johnny watches the talk turn into tasks and feels taller without trying. He looks at the empty slot Susie left for a promise, Thursday's slow song. He picks up the purple pen and writes the last word in careful print. Hour. Then he sets the card home, where it belongs. Mrs. Delaney rings the little bell on the counter once. The sound is round and soft. "We'll open tonight for a trial hour at 7, she says. Lights low, songs chosen. Bring someone who needs a place to stand and breathe. The neighbors drift out in pairs and trios, listing small things they will bring back. The sailmen nod and say they'll be by off the clock. Pops caps the donut box with enough left for afternoon. Susie stacks the blank cards in a neat tower. Carl writes the final line on the maintenance card. Community check, passed. Johnny stands with his palm on the glass and Bunny's laugh in the reflection. Mama loops her arm through his. "Baby," she says, half whisper, half melody, "you look good when you listen." He doesn't pose. He just nods and keeps listening because the room is still talking in a language his shoulders now understand. They tidy the counters. Mrs. Delaney sets the keys by the door for later. The crown bulbs dim to a daytime hush. Outside, Aaron City stretches and settles, citizens walking lighter than they did an hour before. 7 will come. The hour will need care. The floor will want soft steps, and the kids will want someone to show them where to put their hands so the turns feel like clouds instead of corners. Johnny looks at Carl and Susie and Mama and Mrs. Delaney and hears the answer and how they're already moving. Evening settles on Aaron City like a soft coat. Streetlights blink awake. Pop's Diner flips its sign to open again and sends the smell of coffee into the dusk. At the Star Line, Mrs. Delaney unlocks the side door and lets the cool air drift through. The rec room lamps glow low. The crown bulbs on the jukebox warm to honey. Johnny tapes a hand-lettered note to the front window. Thursday's slow song hour, 7 to 8. Bring someone who needs it. Susie places a small basket on the counter for title suggestions and adds 2 pencils that leave good dark lines. Carl checks the carriage belt with the touch of a person greeting a friend. Mama sets Bunny's photograph where the reflection in the glass shows her laughing beside the chrome again. Neighbors arrive the way song gathers harmonies. Eddie from the shop brings a push broom and parks it by the door like a walking stick. The 2 teenagers return with a tin of fresh paint samples and a promise for Saturday. The retired teacher sets a metronome on the counter, doesn't wind it, just lets it sit there like a kind reminder. Pops wheels in a thermos the size of a small barrel and a stack of cups that clack softly. 7 lands without fanfare. Mrs. Delaney rings the counter bell once, a round sound that asks the room to listen. She lifts the Starline token and lays it in Johnny's palm. You start us, baby. Johnny feeds the token into the slot and looks to the first card of the night. Neighborhood Waltz, written in Mrs. Delaney's tidy hand. Carl toggles the selection. The arm moves, the record rises, the needle settles, and the tune opens like a curtain that knows just how far to go. People sway. No one rushes. The retired teacher steps onto the floor with 2 youngsters and shows them where to put their hands so the turn feels like a cloud. Eddie stands with his broom and taps the beat with 1 boot. Pops pours coffee and leaves the cups half full so the heat can rise gently. Mama rests a hand on the jukebox edge and breathes in time. Between songs, the room holds a little hush that tastes like cinnamon and chrome. Susie reads 2 title cards from the basket. After practice 2-step and Saturday chores slow. She tucks them into empty slots and pats them like sleeping kittens. Carl checks the selector track with his eyes only and nods. The machine is steady. The hour is steady with it. On the 3rd song, a small hitch catches in the turntable. No drama, just a stumble that wants attention. Johnny hears it. He lifts a finger. Carl is already at the back panel. Mama takes the floor with the retired teacher and keeps the hush friendly. Susie flashes her light. The hitch is a sleeve brushing the edge where it shouldn't. Carl eases it back. Johnny presses the mounts with the measured touch he learned. The platter evens. The song continues. No apology needed. The room notices and relaxes deeper. Trust earned is a softer pillow. More neighbors come. A nurse in scrubs stands by the door and lets her shoulders drop 2 inches. A mail carrier hangs his bag on the coat rack like a tired coat and smiles with his whole face. The salemen from the morning appear in plain shirts and place a sealed envelope in Mrs. Delaney's hand. She opens it, reads once, and folds it back with a small nod. Later, she tells Johnny, For now, choose one. Johnny picks up a purple ink card from the basket. Hold the door. He sets it to B7, looks at Mama, then at the photograph. The record lifts and lands. The melody that arrives is simple and true, the kind that makes hard days behave for 3 minutes straight. People hear themselves in it without needing words. Johnny stands with his palm on the glass and feels the machine hum thread into his bones. He doesn't pose. He listens. Near the back wall, 2 kids try a turn and tangle their feet. The retired teacher laughs with them, not at them, and shows a smaller step. They try again and float through it. Eddie finally leans the broom and steps out with a neighbor in steel-toe boots. They are careful and proud. Pops claps once, just palms, just enough. Mrs. Delaney lifts the salesman's envelope and taps it to call the room's attention. The city has agreed to pull the jukebox from the surplus list, she says. The Star Line keeps it on one condition. We keep this hour. A sound goes through the room that isn't a cheer so much as relief finding a home. The teenagers high-five and immediately pretend they didn't. The nurse wipes one eye and blames the coffee steam. The mail carrier nods like a person who understands conditions that make sense. They play the sensitive male because Pops insists, and the room smiles without making a joke of it. Then across the gym floor, Susie's card, blue and small and perfect. The music finds the corners and feeds them. The hour walks toward its end without anyone chasing it. For the last song, Mrs. Delaney chooses Bunny's Thursday. She holds the token, then nods to Johnny. He feeds it, toggles the selection himself, and watches the record travel with the respect you give to things that carry more than a tune. The waltz spills out and covers the scuffs and the paint chips and the tired parts of the day. Mama sets her hand on Johnny's arm and they sway a little, just enough to make the photo in the glass look like it's moving too. When the song finishes, nobody claps. They stand still for one breath together and let the quiet land. Then life resumes. Cups click. The broom returns to its corner. The kids practice one more turn by the vending machine. Pops recaps the thermos and promises fresh pastries for Saturday paint. The nurse picks up her bag and leaves lighter. The mail carrier waves like a person on a float that just passed the good block. Mrs. Delaney locks the coin box and slides the key into her sweater. She hands the salesmen back their envelope, now with a receipt for nickels and names of volunteers tucked inside. They shake hands like neighbors, not officials. The retired teacher winds the metronome one tick and stops it again, a promise instead of a command. Carl closes the back panel and writes a small line on the maintenance card. First slow hour held, minor hitch eased, machine and people tuned. Susie stacks the suggestion cards, rubber bands them, and labels the stack Thursday Keepers. Mama lifts Bunny's photograph and kisses 2 fingers to it before setting it back for tomorrow. Johnny stands with his hand on the glass and finally lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Outside, the street is softer. The city seems to walk slower on purpose. Pop's neon hums a lullaby. The Star Line's windows hold a warm square in the night. Mrs. Delaney turns the room lights down. The crown bulbs dim to a last comfortable glow, then rest. They step into the hallway, not tired exactly, more like finished well. The stage curtain lifts a little as if to say, see you, not goodbye. The side door closes behind them with a satisfied click. Back home, Mama sets the maintenance card on the kitchen counter. Susie tucks the Thursday Keepers into a shoebox. Carl sends a message to the teenagers about paint and time. Johnny rinses cups without being asked and stacks them so they can dry in their sleep. Tomorrow we'll hold errands and paint and a second hour. The jukebox will want a new felt mat, and the floor will want tape lines for kids who like a lane. The city will want a letter. The neighborhood will want a list. Johnny looks at his hands and sees they are good at more than poses. He smiles small and true. Saturday wakes up bright and unhurried. At Bunny's kitchen table, the maintenance card sits beside toast and a jar of jam like a little to-do list that knows it will be completed with care. Johnny ties his shoes without tapping the heel for show. Mama watches with a smile that feels like morning sunlight. Little Susie brings the shoebox labeled Thursday Keepers and a purple pen that still writes true. Carl arrives with a felt turntable mat, a soft brush for records, and a roll of painter's tape the color of calm lakes. At the Star Line, Mrs. Delaney opens the side door, and the room answers with that pleasant hush of a place that slept well. Eddie backs his truck to the curb with 2 sawhorses and a plank for a temporary counter. The 2 teenagers from yesterday wheel in paint trays and a tin of soft cream color that will make the walls look like fresh paper. Pop sets a bakery box on the counter and leaves the lid ajar so the donuts can breathe. The retired teacher places a stack of paper feet cutouts on a chair, left and right in pairs, footprints to show where to stand for a gentle turn. They divide the morning the way you divvy up a simple picnic. Carl lifts the back panel on the jukebox. He removes the old felt, brushes the platter until it shines like an easy answer, and sets the new mat down so it lies perfectly flat. He shows Johnny how to clean a stylus with the tiny brush, one direction, light as a moth wing. Johnny follows the motion without hurrying. The needle gleams. The machine hum feels like it just stretched its shoulders. Susie and the teenagers tape a soft lane on the floor for new dancers, gentle lines that guide without scolding. The retired teacher sets the paper feet along the lane and writes notes on small cards. Slow wait. Breathe. Look up. Eddie sands the wobbly chair leg and adds 1 screw. Pops paints a neat sign for the window. Thursday slow song hour, today again at 7. Bring someone who needs it. Mrs. Delaney sits at the desk in the side office and drafts the letter to the city, pen moving in tidy strokes. Oh, the saleman's envelope lies open beside her like a friend who sits quietly, not needing to speak. Volunteers' names gather at the bottom of the page, a long line of signatures that curve and tilt like a good melody. Johnny carries Bunny's photograph to the counter and sets it where the glass will catch it. He runs a soft cloth over the chrome, watching his reflection settle into something less like a statue and more like a person who slept and woke to do good work. Mama touches his shoulder once. He holds still for that one beat, as if it were the downbeat of a song he wants to remember all day. They test 1 record before lunch. Carl toggles Velvet Avenue Waltz. The new felt mat grips, and the music arrives round and even, deeper in a way you can feel in the floorboards. Susie closes her eyes and sways. Johnny hears the change and nods, happy in that quiet way he is practicing. The afternoon is for paint. Trays fill. Rollers whisper over the walls. The cream color lifts the room without changing what it is. The teenagers dab the last edges with small brushes. Eddie leans the broom in the doorway and steps back to admire. The retired teacher sets the metronome on the counter, unwound, a gentle sculpture of timing. A small flicker passes through the lights, not trouble, just a reminder. Carl and Eddie open the breaker closet. Dust soft as talc has lined the top edge. Eddie wipes the contact panel with a clean cloth. Carl tightens 1 loose screw that was making its own tiny thunder. The lights steady, the room relaxes, the way a person does when a shoelace is retied well. Mama carries the letter to the counter. Mrs. Delaney reads it once more aloud. Mom hears the words and agrees. The star line keeps the jukebox as a community instrument. The hour will hold each week. The coin box will become a scholarship jar for kids who want lessons in listening and slow steps. Susie signs her name in purple at the bottom. Johnny signs his in block letters, careful and steady. Late afternoon drifts into that bluish time when lamps look kind. The floor lane dries. The paper feet stay in place like friendly clues. The bakery box closes with just enough left for after. Pops flips the window sign to open for the night. Eddie sets the broom in its corner like a well-parked car. The retired teacher arranges a row of cups for water. 7 arrives with no hurry. Mrs. Delaney gives the Starline token to Johnny and nods toward the first card. Neighborhood waltz again to bless the paint. Carl toggles. The record lifts and lands. The platter turns like a confident thought. The melody opens, and the new walls hold it like a big soft hand. People sway. The lane helps a pair of small kids find the slow turn and the place to look, so nobody gets dizzy. Halfway through the hour, a quiet snag appears. The selector pin for B5 hesitates. Johnny hears the small hitch and looks to Carl. Carl's already moving. He opens the back panel and breathes once. A smudge of paint has tipped onto the slot, just a thumbprint's worth. He wipes it with a corner of clean cloth, then puts one patient drop of oil where the card edge rides. Johnny presses the toggle again. The arm moves true this time. The room notices how no one rushed. Trust softens further, like a pillow someone fluffed without making a show of it. The retired teacher guides a new couple through a simple box step on the taped lane. Left together, right together. Breathe. Look up. They laugh once, softly, when both choose the same foot. Then get it on the next beat and keep it for the length of a verse. Pops hums under his breath while pouring coffee. Eddie lets someone else try the broom tap and claps a quiet clap when they find the rhythm. Susie reads 2 fresh title cards from the basket. Paycheck Friday Sway and Nurse's Break Room. She sets them in empty slots near the end. A nurse from last night smiles at the sight and touches the glass with 2 fingers in thanks. Mama lifts Bunny's photograph and moves it a little so the reflection shows Bunny beside the new paint, like time agreeing to share the frame. For the last song of the hour, Mrs. Delaney chooses Hold the Door. Johnny's card in neat block letters. He feeds the token. The arm carries the record like a careful hand with something warm on a cold night. The tune arrives plain and kind. People hear themselves returning to steadier versions of their day. Johnny stands with his palm on the glass and lets his shoulders match the hum. He is not performing. He is keeping time for a room that has learned to breathe again. When the music rests, the room rests with it. No applause, just a long, easy exhale shared by friends. The nurse lifts her bag. The teenagers look at the drying paint and nod that tomorrow they will do the trim. Eddie straightens the broom bristles with 2 fingers. Pops leaves a small envelope by the coin box with a note. First week of nickels for the jar. Carl writes a line on the maintenance card. New felt install. Selector clean. Breaker brushed. Second slow hour held. Susie gathers the suggestion cards and rubber bands them into a tidy stack labeled Saturday Keepers. Mrs. Delaney folds the city letter and slips it into a large envelope with all the signatures. The retired teacher numbers the paper feet so they can be put back in the same places next time. Mama places Bunny's photograph into a simple frame they found in the supply closet and sets it by the glass where the crown bulbs can visit it each evening. Johnny takes a comb from his pocket, looks at it, then laughs softly at himself and tucks it away. He slides a clean polishing cloth under the jukebox instead, just at the front edge where he can reach it every night. A small promise he knows he will keep. they dim the lamps. The crown bulbs glow to a final warm ember and go quiet. The fresh paint holds the last of the evening like a soft memory. Outside, the street has that post-music calm a city gets when people walked home slower than they arrived. Tomorrow is for sealing the paint and posting the letter. The hour will be made official. A little plaque might find its way to the wall by the coin slot. The kids will learn the second turn. The lane will get new tape where feet wore joy into the edges. Johnny steps into the hallway with Mama, Susie, Carl, and Mrs. Delaney. They are not tired so much as settled. He looks back once at the glass in the photograph and the soft, dark crown, and he nods to himself without needing a mirror to tell him how that looks. Sunday morning carries a steady calm. The fresh paint at the star line looks dry enough to hold a shadow without smudging. Mrs. Delaney arrives with a manila envelope under her arm and a small brass plaque wrapped in tissue. The letter to the city was delivered at dawn. The reply came back with a stamp and a smile. Approved, it says in careful ink. The jukebox stays. The hour stays. The jar stays, with a line about scholarships that looks like it enjoys being written. Pops brings a step stool and a screwdriver. Eddie carries a short level and a pencil. The teenagers come with trim brushes and a roll of neat tape. The retired teacher brings a stack of clean paper feet and a quiet metronome that sits on the counter like a friendly lighthouse. Mama sets Bunny's framed photo in its final spot beside the glass. Little Susie sets the shoebox of Thursday keepers by the coin box and sharpens 2 pencils because sharpened pencils make plans feel ready. Johnny runs the soft cloth along the chrome and watches his reflection settle into a person who knows what to do next. Carl opens the back panel and checks the carriage track, the belt, the mounts, the needle. Nothing asks for help. Even so, he notes the checks on the maintenance card because writing it down makes the steadiness real. They unwrap the plaque. The brass is simple and sure. Thursday's slow song hour, 7 to 8. Bring someone who needs it. Jukebox kept by community care. Pops holds the plaque against the wall. Eddie marks the holes. Johnny turns the screws until they snug without strain. The plaque rests flat and true. The room seems taller by an inch, like a person who remembered good posture. A small wave of visitors arrives without fuss. The nurse, off shift, places a book in the scholarship jar for kids who want to learn the steps. The mail carrier, tips less heavy on a Sunday, brings a roll of tape for the lane. A boy with scuffed sneakers and a backpack stops by the window and looks at the crown bulbs like stars. Susie opens the door and waves him in. He stands very still, then not so still. Johnny crouches to the boy's height and shows him the toggle. 1 up means choose, 1 down means wait. The boy nods like he has been waiting to understand something all week. Johnny places the Starline token in his palm and guides his hand to the slot. The machine answers with a good click. Carl points to a card near the end. Nurse's break room. The boy looks at the nurse. She smiles and nods, surprised and glad. The record lifts, lands, and the music comes easy and even. They do not make a ceremony of it. The moment doesn't need a stage. The boy listens with his eyes first, and then with his shoulders. When the song finishes, he hands the token back and says, "Thank you," in a voice that keeps most of the word for later. Susie writes a new card in clear letters. First dance here. She sets it aside for the next hour. By afternoon, the trim lines shine, the paper feet are numbered and stacked. The breaker box is labeled in Carl's neat print, and the counter holds a jar with a label in Susie's purple pen. Lessons in listening. Pops counts nickels and folds a receipt. Not for money this time, but for names. Volunteers for Thursday. The list grows into a small river of handwriting. A tiny hiccup flutters near the end of the day. The coin slot sticks on a token that caught its edge. Carl breathes once and opens the panel. Johnny keeps a hand on the glass so the room knows this is care, not worry. Carl loosens a guide, shifts the token, tightens with a touch as light as a moth wing. The mechanism frees. The token drops home. The crown bulbs glow a shade warmer, pleased with how small difficulties were treated, like friends who needed a hand instead of problems to fix. Mrs. Delaney pins the approved letter beside the plaque with 2 brass tacks. She sets the keys in their spot by the door where they belong. The retired teacher traces the lane with the heel of her palm and smiles at the faint dark where feet tried and tried again and learned. The teenagers tuck their brushes into a jar to soak and promise to return Wednesday to hang a small shelf for cups. Eddie shelves the broom and straightens its bristles with 2 fingers. Pops leaves a fresh envelope by the coin box and points at the bakery across the street. Muffins tomorrow. That is a promise, shaped like sugar. Evening leans in. The light through the windows goes soft and gold. The hour will not be held tonight. It doesn't need to be, and that is part of why it works. Johnny stands with his palm on the glass one more time and feels the machine's hum settle into the room the way a low cat purr settles across a couch. He checks the plaque once, not to admire, just to be sure the screws are right. They are. They turn down the lamps. The crown bulbs dim to a comfortable ember. The jukebox rests, ready. The star line holds its new calm like a bowl holds water. Outside, Aaron City wears that end-of-weekend quiet where even cars try to glide. At home, the kitchen clock keeps its kind tick. Mama sets the maintenance card beside a plate of cookies and a glass of milk like a little report that earned dessert. Susie adds 2 title cards to the Thursday keepers. Paper route shuffle. Coach said breathe. Carl messages the volunteers with a schedule that leaves room for life. Johnny washes the polishing cloth and drapes it over the radiator to dry so it will be soft again tomorrow. Bunny's frame photo catches a last slant of light in the living room and throws it toward the hallway. Johnny pauses at the picture. The grin finds his face without effort, smaller than the one he used to aim at mirrors, truer than the one he kept for crowds. Mama steps beside him and rests her head on his shoulder for a beat. He doesn't move until the beat finishes. Night settles. The city breathes. Somewhere, the nurse opens her book and turns a page slower than yesterday. The mail carrier puts his feet up, socks mismatched on purpose. The boy with scuffed sneakers tells someone at home about a machine that listens when you learn how to ask it. Pop sets dough to rise under a clean towel and hums a waltz that will smell like sugar in the morning. At the star line, the plaque on the wall reflects the last of the streetlight. The approved letter rests beside it, 2 thumbprints at the corners where it was held with care. The token sleeps in its saucer. The crown bulbs hold their glow like a secret they are happy to share tomorrow. Johnny turns out his lamp and lies back. He isn't counting how many people will see him next. He is counting the slow beats of a song he knows by heart now. 1, 2, 3. The hour will come again. The room will breathe. The screws will snug. The belt will listen. The nickels will teach. His shoulders will know when to drop and when to lift and how to stand with his hand on the glass when someone needs a place to be steady. The city slides into the kind of quiet that keeps mornings healthy. The jukebox rests. The plaque keeps its promise. Johnny's breath matches the rhythm of a slow waltz that no one can hear but everyone will feel when the door opens and 7 arrives, right on time. Now let's go towards our favorites, Tom and Jerry. Night hangs easy over the old brick building. Hall lights glow like sleepy fireflies behind frosted glass. In apartment 3B, the refrigerator hums a low, steady note. moonlight slides across the linoleum in a soft rectangle. Tom dozes on the windowsill, tail curled, whiskers barely trembling with the city's distant lull. From under the baseboard, Jerry peeks out, eyes bright as two seeds catching starlight. Somewhere down the hallway, the big grandfather clock forgets to tick. It misses one beat, then another, and the whole building seems to hold its breath. A kettle in 2A size, a baby in 4C turns over and settles. The missing tick hangs in the air like a question that wants a gentle answer. Tom's ear flicks. He blinks, listens, and hops to the floor with the softest thump. Jerry hears the same quiet gap and steps onto the baseboard ledge. They meet by the cracked doorstop, both still, both listening. No chase arrives. The night is asking for help, not for fuss. Tom gestures toward the hallway with a small tilt of his head. Jerry nods and taps his chest once, a promise that he will not make trouble if Tom won't. They ease the apartment door open just enough to slip through. The corridor smells faintly of soap and warm dust. A string of light bulbs hums like moths singing to themselves. At the end of the hall, the big clock stands sentinel, tall and kindly, its face pale as a soft moon. The brass pendulum rests where it stopped halfway through a swing. Tom places a paw on the case and feels the wood's held breath. Jerry scrambles up the molding with the confidence of someone who knows every crumb in every corner. He reaches the keyhole, peeks through, and squeaks a quiet observation that means the gears are tired, not broken. A groan comes from the stairwell. Spike. The bulldog sleeps downstairs in the laundry room, his snore a regular wave breaking on a gentle shore. They will not wake him. Tom pads back to the apartment and returns with a saucer of oil and a scrap of soft cloth. Jerry disappears beneath the door and returns dragging a length of kite string saved from summer, clean and strong. Together they open the clock's small side panel. Inside, the brass bones wait patiently. Dust lies in the corners like old promises. Tom holds the cloth in two careful paws and wipes a gear until it shines a shy circle. Jerry dips a pin into the saucer and places a single dot of oil where teeth meet, precise as a raindrop. The pendulum nudges. Not yet, says the wood. Almost. Their work slows to the pace of the night. Tom listens for the baby upstairs and times each dab between tiny breaths. Jerry listens for the kettle in 2A and matches his motions to its soft rise and fall. The building gives back a little sigh with each easy stroke. The mail slot flutters with a draft and a deli menu slips through, landing like a placemat. Jerry flattens it with both paws and tears a neat strip. Tom twists the strip into a cushion for the pendulum's rest, just enough to quiet a click that had been too sharp. Jerry ties a loop of kite string around a loose guide and knots it down with a sailor's patience. A floorboard pops under someone's dream. Tom and Jerry freeze, then relax. The wood settles again, like a cat needing a pillow and deciding is good. Jerry points at the pendulum and mimics a swing with his arms. Tom smiles with his eyes and taps the brass once, a feather touch. The pendulum moves left, right, left, right. The sound returns smaller at first, a spare heartbeat, then fuller, warm as a blanket. Tick, tock. The hallway breathes with it. The bulbs forget their moth song and hush. The clock's hands begin to climb toward their next quiet duty. They close the panel and sit together on the baseboard, backs against the clock, listening to the steady. No one speaks. They do not need to. Tom adjusts the saucer so it won't tip. Jerry wipes a last dot of oil from his whisker and leans an elbow against the wood like a tiny foreman. From 4C, the baby releases a soft sigh that lands like a thank you. In 2A, the kettle finishes its whisper. Downstairs, Spike's snores line up with the clock, and make a calm duet. The building's old bones settle into the new rhythm. Tom stands and offers a palm-sized high five. Jerry returns it, quick and light. They share the briefest grin, the kind that doesn't break the hush, and look down the hall where one more piece of the night waits to be mended. The laundry room door is ajar, and a thread of water sings from a faucet that forgot to stop. Another small kindness is needed. They carry the saucer and the string and the soft cloth along the corridor, stepping in time with the renewed tick. The clock keeps watch behind them, proud and quiet. The night goes with them like a friend who knows when to walk beside and when to fall a step behind, so the path feels wide. The laundry room is cool and soap-sweet. A thin thread of water plays from the old sink, ringing the rim of a bucket with a sound like a tiny bell that cannot figure out bedtime. Spike lies in his basket under the folding table, chin on paws, snore steady as the subway far below. One ear lifts when Tom and Jerry slip in, then settles again. Peace is a blanket everyone shares if they tuck the corners right. The sink faucet gleams in soft patches where many towels have passed. Its handle wobbles with the confidence of something that has been useful for a long time. Jerry climbs the pipe like a lamppost and tests the handle with 2 careful paws. The drip slows, then returns, stubborn as a lullaby that forgot the last line. Tom pads to the shelf where a jumble of helpful things lives. Clothespins nap in a jar. A bar of laundry soap waits in a dish. A stack of lost buttons sits in a tin that rattles like a polite rain. He opens the tin, finds a flat gray washer that is almost right, but not quite. Jerry points to a bottle cap that fell behind the mop bucket months ago. Perfect, he squeaks, meaning it will make a cushion where brass meets brass. They work in whispers of motion. Jerry wedges himself under the handle and loosens the stem with a twist learned from 1,000 jam jar rescues. Tom catches the pieces in his palm so nothing clinks. The old rubber washer shows its years, edges frayed like an often read book. Tom sets the bottle cap on top like a hat, then places the worn washer over it, so the cap becomes a firm heart. Jerry ties a loop of kite string around the stem to guide the stack home without a scrape. They seat the handle back in place. Tom tightens, not strong, only steady. The drip gives a single bright note, then thinks better of it. Silence pools in the bucket, deep and kind. Spike's snore slides into harmony with the soft hush of machines asleep. Jerry leans his back against the cool pipe and grins with both eyes. Tom ruffles his head with one careful fingertip. The faucet rests. Another voice in the room lifts a small complaint. The laundry cart at the wall has a wobbly wheel that clicks every time someone pushes it. Not loud, but enough to bother the hall at nap hours. Tom tips the cart gently. Jerry tests each wheel with a spin. One sticks, then lets go with a chirp. Lint has braided itself into a tight ring behind the axle. They do not pull hard. They coax. Jerry threads the kite string between hub and frame and saws in slow strokes, while Tom turns the wheel a finger at a time. The lint ring unfurls like a sleepy caterpillar and falls soft onto the floor, a dab of oil from the saucer, a slow turning spin. The click disappears. The wheel rolls as quiet as a thought you enjoy keeping to yourself. On the folding table sits a basket of single socks, a small museum of almosts. Jerry hops in and arranges them by color, then by size, then sets pairs that might one day meet in the front, like neighbors who nod in the elevator. Tom adds a clothespin to each hopeful couple, a gentle promise to the future. A hinge sighs near the door. The dryer door has learned to squeak. Tom presses his ear to the latch and listens to the metal's thin song. Soap, just a breath of it, across the catch. He rubs a fingertip along the bar and draws a barely there line. Jerry opens and closes the door in a rhythm that matches the building's quiet tick. The squeak gentles into a whisper, then into nothing at all. Spike's paw twitches once as if he is chasing a tennis ball in a dream, then rests. A drier light winks and decides to sleep too. Somewhere above them, the baby in 4C turns and settles again. The building gathers their small work into its bones and says thank you by relaxing. Jerry points his nose toward the stairwell. A draft moves there, not unfriendly, only the kind that sneaks under door seals and lifts corners of mail. Tom nods. They pass the bulletin board where notices tilt, and a thumbtack sits 3 holes to the left of useful. Jerry straightens a notice about plant watering days and presses the tack true. Tom smooths the edge with one paw until the paper lies flat like a calm breath. They climb. The stair landing window rattles a shy rattle. Its latch is tired and leaves a sliver where night threads through. Tom folds the soft cloth into a neat wedge. Jerry slides it into the seam until the glass sits gentle against wood. The rattle stops, and the draft turns into a faint cool that minds its manners. From the hallway above, a radio barely glows, quiet as a lantern inside a hand. The big clock at the end of the corridor keeps its new steady step. Tick-tock Spike snores to the same time signature below. The building feels like a quilt someone just patted smooth. Tom and Jerry pause at the turn of the stairs and look back down into the laundry room. The faucet sleeps. The cart waits without complaint. The socks are arranged like a little chorus practicing patience. They share a small nod, the way teammates do when a play works, and no one needs to spike a ball to feel it. They move on, pads and paws light on the wood. A faint metallic ping answers from the roof, the kind a loose antenna makes when the wind makes a point. Another small kindness is waiting under the stars. The fire escape is cool under paw and pad. Night air smells like dusted brick and a little pepper from someone's window pot of basil. Tom goes first, tail low, shoulders easy. Jerry rides the rail, small hands on the iron as if steering a quiet boat. Above them, the metallic ping comes again, a shy complaint from the antenna mast, where wind has a habit of making points. They ease out onto the roof. Tar paper lies flat in most places, a corner lifted near the vent like a page someone forgot to smooth. Water beads the size of lentils sit in shallow cups and reflect the moon in tiny circles. Across the way, a tabby cat on a neighboring sill blinks a slow greeting. Tom returns it with the same slow blink. Jerry waves a whisker-tip hello. The city approves and lights one window at a time. The antenna stands tall by the chimney, guy wire humming in a key that doesn't suit sleep. Tom presses a paw to the mast and feels the wobble. Not danger, only a loose knot somewhere between wind and metal. Jerry coils the kite string at his shoulder and taps the saucer of oil he carried in a pocket of folded deli menu. Workbench, he squeaks, pointing at a milk crate near the vent. They make it a table. The wind lifts, tests them, decides they can be trusted, and settles into listening. Tom checks each tie. One eye hook is bent, a whisper open, enough to let the wire chatter. Jerry braces against the mast, feet planted, and threads the kite string around the hook to give the tired metal a friend. Tom bends the eye closed with careful thumbs until the mouth meets its lip again. A dab of oil where wire rubs, a soft cloth rub until the metal remembers how to move without gossip. The hum drops half a note, then another, and lands in quiet. Somewhere 3 floors down, a television picture sharpens on a late movie where people talk low and carry umbrellas that never quite open. Tom looks over the edge. In 1D, a glow steadies. An old man's head tilts, satisfied, and his shoulders sink into his chair as if someone just added one more cushion. Jerry points to the lifted flap of tar paper near the vent. Tom kneels. The tar is let go along one seam, not wide, just enough to tap the roof rhythm on gusty nights. Jerry pulls 2 clothespins from the laundry room stash he tucked in his belt. Tom smooths the flap down with the cloth, breath warm to coax it flat. Jerry pins the edge to the flashing so it will hold until morning can bring proper patching. The flap stops tapping. The roof's heartbeat evens out to the distant siren of taxis pretending to be waves. The water tank creaks, not a complaint. More a reminder that wood swells when the day is hot and shrinks when the night is kind. Jerry hops onto the tank ladder, climbs 2 careful rungs, and listens with his cheek to the stave. Tom places a palm above the lower band. A bolt has loosened a quarter turn. Tom tightens it to snug, not strict. The creak softens into a wooden thank you. A pigeon shuffles on the parapet, head cocked. Jerry tips a crumb from his pocket, the last of a cracker saved from earlier. The pigeon takes it and stays, a quiet witness with good manners. The tabby across the alley has slipped fully into his windowsill now, chin on paws, eyes half shut, approving of this quiet night union. They do a slow circuit. A vent cap gets a friendly twist. A skylight latch gets a tiny soap kiss along the slide. Jerry finds a bottle cap hiding by the drain and tucks it into his belt. Useful, always. Tom sweeps a palm along the gravel and gathers the small, sharp bits into a neat pile where no paw will find them at dawn. Near the stairwell bulkhead, the roof door lifts a little when the wind thinks about ideas. Its jamb is shy of square. Tom folds the soft cloth into a wedge, sets it under the latch side. Jerry ties a line of kite string from hinge to pipe. Not tight, just enough to remind the door where home is. The wind tries one more thought, decides to agree, and moves on to flatter places. They stop and listen. The city sends up boiler breaths and elevator sighs, the good steady kind. The big hallway clock below keeps its new measure. Spike's snore comes through the laundry vent like a low tide. A far train draws a line on the horizon and gently erases it again. Tom sits with his back against the chimney. Jerry sits beside him, legs out, heels tapping once on tar, a small metronome set to satisfied. The antenna stays quiet. The flap stays put. The tank remembers how to be held. In 1D, the old movie finds its third act, and everyone speaks softly into their collars like they're telling secrets to scarves. Jerry pats Tom's arm and points to the scuttle hatch. One last check. They stand. The hatch hinges breathe easy. The ladder down smells of pencil shavings and old boots. They descend into the stairwell, bringing the rooftop calm with them like carried air. On the landing, a houseplant leans toward the window. Jerry turns the pot a quarter turn so it can see a different star tonight. Tom straightens the little index card stuck into its soil. Water Thursdays, it says. The tea is thick from 3 different pens. Good hands already look after things here. They reach the hallway. The big clock nods at them with its tick. The apartment doors sleep with their number plates dreaming straight. Someone has set a plate of cookies outside 2A with a note that says help yourself and a smaller note under it that says not you, ants. Jerry admires the handwriting. Tom admires the restraint and takes none. They share one look that says the roof will keep. Then another ping, very faint, reminds them of the fire escape landing on 5 where a shutter likes to chatter when the wind lifts its chin. They have enough string. They have enough clothespins. They have enough night to teach one more thing how to rest. The stairwell grows quieter as they climb. On the fifth-floor landing, the night air presses its ear to a narrow window. Beside it, a wood shutter shivers on a loose hinge, chattering at every curious breeze. Not loud, but enough to keep dreams from finishing their sentences. Jerry pads along the sill and tests the hinge with both paws. The screws sit a breath from snug. Tom kneels, folds the soft cloth to make a tiny cushion, and slides it between shutter and frame at the spot where wood kisses wood too sharply. The cloth accepts the job without complaint. Jerry fishes out one of the clothespins from his belt and clips the cushion in place like a neat bow tie. Then he twists the first screw a quarter turn, then the second, pausing between each as if asking, "Is this better?" The shutter settles. Wind tries a new idea. The cloth and the hinge agree without fuss. The chatter melts into the lightest tap, then into nothing at all. A draft finds a doormat that has wandered sideways. Tom straightens it with a single sweep of his paw. The mat's woven letters breathe easier. "Welcome," they say, and they mean it again. From behind a door down the hall comes the soft rustle of pages turning. Somewhere below, the clock keeps its patient step. Tick, tock, Spike's snore purls up the stairs like a gentle hallway rug. Jerry points to a small rattle in the radiator cover. One slat winks with each sigh of steam. Tom lays the last sliver of laundry soap along the slat's lip, the barest film. Jerry flexes the metal gently. The wink becomes a blink, then closes its eyes and rests. On the way back to the landing, a notice flutters on the bulletin board. "Free chair to good home. Take from basement." Jerry tucks its corner under the thumbtack, smoothing the paper until it lies as calm as new sheets. A single cookie crumb sits under the board with no ants in sight. Jerry looks at Tom. Tom looks at Jerry. They both look at the plate outside 2A and decide kindness is a full plate at midnight. Jerry nudges the crumb into a crack so the morning sparrow at the window can find it instead. The stair window glass holds the city like a slow snow globe. Across the alley, the tabby is fully asleep now, chin tucked, ear relaxed. A laundromat sign 3 buildings over blinks its last blink and goes to bed. The sky keeps its deep velvet. Tom rests his palm against the shutter one more time. It answers with stillness. He and Jerry share a brief nod. Small things make room for sleep. They descend. Footsteps match to the building's new quiet. On 4, the baby gives a murmured half-cry and then a longer sigh, as if the missing piece has been returned. On 3, a radio whispers a last chord. On 2, the kettle sits peaceful and sure. At the first-floor landing, they pause. The mail chute lid bumps softly whenever the lobby door breathes. Jerry hops onto the box and studies the hinge. A dab of oil, a finger press on a spring that wants reminding. The lid sighs and decides to stay composed. The lobby lights dim on their timer, not to darkness, just to a softer version of seeing. Outside the frosted glass, the street leaf shadows rock in quiet time. Tom and Jerry turn toward home. Back on 3, the hallway holds its new calm, like a cup holds warm milk. The big clock at the end has found a steady voice, each tick a blanket corner tucked in just right. Tom and Jerry stand a moment in front of it, not to admire, only to listen, and make sure the promise they made with oil and cloth is still being kept. It is. A soft clink calls from the radiator near apartment 3A. Someone has rested a tiny ceramic bird on the cover, and its base taps the grate whenever the heat sighs. Jerry lifts the bird with 2 hands. Tom slides a folded square of deli menu beneath it, smoothing the edge so the ceramic sits flat. The heat breathes. The bird says nothing. Perfect. Near the stairwell, a shoe rack complains by leaning. Tom nudges a stray boot into line. Jerry tucks a shoelace under so no one will step on it in the morning. The rack straightens, less burdened by chaos. Quiet isn't only the absence of sound. It's the arrangement of everything that wants to rest. From under 3C's door, a sliver of light spills, golden and small. The smell of chamomile drifts into the hall. Tom eases a draft stopper back to the threshold where it belongs. The sliver thins. The tea works. They pass 3B, their own door, and keep walking 2 more lengths of carpet. It feels right to circle once more before bedding down. Jerry hops to the baseboard and checks the tiny seam where his door meets wall. A thread of air that used to whisper there no longer finds a path. The cloth wedge from earlier has taught the building how to hold its breath in all the best places. Just as they turn back, a faint tick, not like the clock, but like a button falling into a small space, arrives from the stair landing plant. Its tray has shifted on the stand. Jerry steadies the tray. Tom turns the pot a quarter turn. Soil settles. Leaves find a new angle of lamp. The plant shows more of its green to the night. Everyone smiles without needing to move their mouths. Down the hall, the elevator, that old, polite square, rests with its doors parted a whisper, as if listening. Jerry peers into the seam and sees a scrap of junk mail lodging a sensor. He slides it out with 2 fingers and folds it into a neat square for the recycling basket. The doors ease together with the gentlest kiss. The elevator sighs its thanks and sleeps. They return to 3B. Before going in, Tom sets the saucer on the mat and wipes its rim with the soft cloth. Clean things rest better. Jerry coils the last of the kite string, now a proper tool again instead of a tangle, and tucks it into his little toolbox cut from a matchbox and pried. Inside, the kitchen holds its hush. The refrigerator hum is even. The linoleum keeps its cool square of moonlight. Tom sets the saucer and cloth by the sink. Jerry pats the baseboard once, like a friend's shoulder. They portion out the quiet, like dessert. Tom nuzzles the dish towel into its bar so it won't slip with a thump in the night. Jerry eases the sugar jar lid so it meets the glass without a click. The window latch gets a fingertip check. The shade gives one last soft roll and stops where the moon can still draw a stripe on the floor. From the living room, the couch creaks a tiny greeting. Tom jumps up, kneads twice, then settles with his front paws tucked and his tail a comma. Jerry climbs the lamp cord like a vine and sits on the table edge near the potted fern, where the air is soft and leaf-scented. They don't speak. They've learned how to let a room talk when it wants to. The building answers in a low chord. The clock. Spike's tide breath downstairs, the radiator's pulse, the city's slow wheel outside. Everything fits. Morning slides into the building on felt soles. First comes the pale hint at the edges of the shade, then a quiet brightening that warms the linoleum stripe. The grand clock keeps its tick. It has not missed a beat. The faucet in the laundry room holds its peace. The rooftop forgets to hum and chooses to glow instead. Tom wakes because the light finds his whiskers and paints them in gold. He yawns without a sound, a cathedral door opening to let the day step in. Jerry stretches on the table edge, arms wide, toes pointed, a tiny gymnasium of one. They glance at each other, and the look contains the whole night, the hinge, and the flap, and the belt, and the plant, and the many little yeses a building whispered back. Down in the hall, a newspaper thumps the lobby mat, then stops thumping because the mat is straight. Footsteps come soft, soft, soft. A pair of slippers in 2A, a pair of little feet, in 4C. The baby laughs once, as if turning the page of a dream and liking the picture. Tom pads to the window and lifts the shade 2 inches. The city is a gentle watercolor. Across the alley, the tabby blinks good morning with both eyes at once, then folds back into himself with complete trust. On the rooftop, the pinned tar seam lies quiet, clothespins dignified as medals. Jerry drops to the counter and taps the kettle with his knuckles, a test that is also a greeting. It answers with the agreeable hollow of a thing ready to be useful, but not in a hurry. He writes a note on a sliver of paper with a stolen pencil tip and leans it against the sugar jar. Window plant turned. Mail chute quiet. Clock okay? Good morning. Tom hops to the floor and noses the apartment door open a finger width. The hallway smells like toasted bread and floor wax and the inside of a good coat. A plate outside 2A holds 3 cookies and a new note. Help yourself, it says with a smile drawn like a crescent moon. Not you, Ants, it adds, because tradition is a kind of kindness, too. Tom looks at Jerry. Jerry looks at Tom. They think of sparrows and boys with backpacks and nurses off night shift. Tom picks up the plate in both paws. Jerry trots beside him, steadying it with one hand. They leave the cookies on the radiator cover near the stairwell with a tiny card. For anyone who needs one on the way out. Someone will. Back in 3B, the room expects nothing and gives everything. Tom returns the saucer to the cupboard, the soft cloth to its place, the matchbox toolbox to Jerry's door. Jerry pats the baseboard again, and this time the baseboard seems to pat back. They settle for a last few minutes of dawn sleep. Tom curls on the windowsill, sun warming his spine in a stripe. Jerry nests in the curve of a book spine on the side table, where the paper smells like rain that has been indoors a long time. The building breathes. Spike snores one final contented note, and wakes to stretch and yawn and blink at a faucet that knows when to stop. The big clock announces the hour with nothing more than exactly enough sound, and every door in the hall, even the quiet ones, seems to nod. Outside, a bus sighs, then rolls. A sparrow finds the crumb Jerry left and chirps a gratitude that bounces down the alley and up into the stripe of morning over the sink. Across town, someone flips an antenna switch and finds a clearer picture than yesterday, for reasons they won't consider long. They'll just sit down and let their shoulders lower. Tom's breathing matches the clock for a while, then drifts half a tick behind. A harmony the building knows by heart now. Jerry's whiskers twitch once as he dreams of clothespins with medals and shutters that hold hands with wind. When the day is fully awake, there will be other small jobs. A loose page on the lobby corkboard, a squeak that will try to grow and be taught to fade. The city always has corners that need feeding. For now, 3B holds 2 friends who learned how to share the night with the building, and the building holds them back. Quiet is not empty. It is full of every tiny thing that decided to sleep. Midnight rests over Ennsville like a heavy quilt. Streetlights wear halos the color of warm milk. A sprinkler in someone's yard ticks and sighs, then remembers the hour and goes quiet. In Billy's house, a refrigerator hums at the right volume for dreaming. In Mandy's room, the curtains barely move, obedient to the still air. In the attic, where Grim keeps his trunk and the things that don't belong in daylight, a different sound threads the quiet, too bright for sleep. Grim's scythe is humming off-key. Grim lifts the blade and listens with his head bent, bone ear to metal song. The note is sharp by hair, the way a streetlight flickers when it wants attention. Billy sprawls on an old quilt, chin in hands, eyes big with the kind of excitement that tries to whisper. Mandy stands with arms folded, inspecting the sound the way a lighthouse inspects fog. That's the pitch that rattles windows, Mandy says in a voice that knows how to calm storms. Fix it. Grim turns the haft in his palms. A wind from nowhere moves along the rafters, not cold, simply awake. He eases the scythe into its cradle and checks the tiny runes that keep its song in time with sleeping towns. One rune is faded thin as chalk. On the trunk lid, a postcard lies under a paperweight shaped like a moon. The card's edges curl the way old secrets do. Fine script covers the back. Urgent and gentle, it reads. Hourglass in the workshop of sleep is leaking at the hairline. Dream sand is whispering out. If your blade is singing wrong, that's why. Bring it. Bring patience. Knock softly. Signed, S. Billy points at the signature and smiles with his whole face. S for sandwich, he says. Mandy doesn't look up. Sandman, she answers. And we're going now. They step through the attic hatch into the night yard. Grass cools their ankles. Crickets lift a slow pattern and set it down again. Ennsville is a city that pretends not to be sleepy, but even Ennsville softens at 12. Grim taps the scythe once against his palm, trying to settle the pitch. The note flares, then droops. Off by a breath. Off enough. There's a door to the workshop, Grim says, and his voice puts a shawl on the night. It moves around. Tonight it likes the abandoned train platform by the old quarry. He looks to Mandy, who nods like someone who expected exactly that. Billy whispers choo-choo under his breath and then hushes himself with both hands. They walk. Sidewalk seams pass like footnotes. Lawn sprinklers hold still. A dog down the street remembers a bark and decides to save it for tomorrow. At the corner mailbox, a moth rides the blue paint like a tiny sailor. The world has chosen small motions. Irwin sits on his porch steps, head in hands, a book of vocabulary words open like a fan. He looks up when the three go by. Yo, he says softly. Then remembers the hour and lowers his voice to the size of the moon on the postcard. You guys out for a midnight library run? Mandy nods once, which means keep studying and also sleep soon. Irwin closes the book without losing his place and smiles at the thought that being told to sleep can sometimes feel like a gift. They cross the lot behind the grocery where the carts are stacked in the shape of careful rectangles. A cat perched on a dumpster blinks approval and returns to dreaming with eyes open. At the railway fence, Heather and Sumac lean in to listen. Beyond it, the old platform waits, board silvered by many seasons. A sign that once read Ennsville Local now says Ennsville Lull, because the wind took the rest and nobody argued. At the far end of the platform stands a door where no door belongs. It is the color of the inside of a seashell, framed in brass, rubbed smooth by many hands. On its face, there is a small knocker shaped like a closed eye. The knocker breathes in and out, as if remembering how night works. The scythe hums once in its off key, and the knocker opens a slit to look. Grim raises his free hand and taps, not louder than a teacup being set down. The seam around the door brightens. A sigh like a quilt being shaken out answers from the other side. The eye knocker closes satisfied. The door unlatches with a click the size of a blink. They step inside. The workshop of sleep is not one room. It is many rooms that agree on hush. Lamps with shades like halos float at shoulder height. Workbenches carry bowls of thimbles labeled hush, pause, and let go. A rack holds spools of thread in colors with names like Stillwater and Safe Dark and Aftercry. Bats nap upside down over a sorting table, their tiny feet clasped around string tags stamped with children's names and street corners and the word later. At the center of the workshop turns an hourglass, taller than Grim, and older than the word dream. Its waist bears a scuff line a hair's breadth wide. From that line, a whisper of sand runs like someone telling a joke too near a library. The sand that spills out forms a small dune that does not grow too big because the workshop is tidy even in emergencies. Every grain in the dune glows softly as if remembering the last face it soothed. Sandman stands on a step stool with a jeweler's loop over one eye and a pencil behind the other ear. He wears sleeves rolled and a shirt that smells like cinnamon tea. His hands are steady. His face carries the expression of someone who can be surprised by trouble, but never offended by it. He glances at the scythe and gives it a tired smile. "You're singing the wrong verse, friend," he says. "Forgive me. We've a fissure where there ought to be a seam." Mandy steps to the bench and reads the labels without touching. Billy breathes in as if the place smells like pancakes. It smells like freshly folded blankets and pencils and the clean, almost sweet scent of night air brought indoors. Grim rests the scythe along two pegs and tries not to let its tune climb. The blade brightens once like a nervous thought and then behaves under Mandy's look. "We can't patch from the outside," Sandman says. "That would make a hard spot in a soft instrument. We have to slow the fall, open a gentle gap, move the sand to bowls while we mend." He points at the shelves. "Hush for the gears, pause for the spill, let go for the hands." He looks at Mandy's flat calm and nods. "You'll be good at the last one." The workshop hears their decision and lowers its lamps by the smallest amount, as if drawing the room closer. A clock somewhere ticks on a rhythm that does not fight with hearts. On the far shelf, a jar labeled "Night Train" glows faintly for travelers. Billy raises his hand. "Can I be in charge of holding the bowls very still?" Sandman smiles. "That is an important job." Billy grows 2 inches taller without standing up. Grim takes a brush and writes a line of hush along the hourglass frame where the runes set the blade's pitch. The hum drops half a note. Mandy rests her fingers on the let-go jar and breathes once. Air in the workshop changes, plainer and easier, like a knot untied but not thrown away. Sandman loosens a single ring at the hourglass throat and turns it a fraction until the fissure is a seam with a mouth so narrow that grains pass one at a time. Billy holds bowls. Grim gathers the falling sand as if cupping rain for birds. Mandy watches the line where glass meets glass and says, "Now once," not as a command, but as timing. Sandman lifts the ring free. The sand stops in place above the seam, held by the hush, by the pause, by a room that remembers how to wait. They look at the line together. In it, tiny images drift like the reflections in bubbles. A porch step, a bandage peeled slowly, a dog curling beside a couch, a math problem understood so late it feels like magic, a mother's shoulder, a street with no cars, a grandfather's wool cap, a word stuck behind someone's teeth finally finding the door. Dream sand keeps good records. The fissure is only as wide as a promise broken once and mended carefully. Sandman sets a thin strip of warm sugar glass along the join. Grim breathes on it, a bone-cool breath that knows how to avoid scaring things. Mandy places one palm on the frame and says, "Stay." The strip obeys. Billy steadies the bowls, eyes proud and quiet. The hourglass waits, then gives a sound like someone saying yes after thinking. The seam closes around the new line. Sandman tightens the ring back into place, a quarter turn, then a whisper more. The dune in the tray lies where it is, starlit and still. Grim touches the rune near his blade again. The scythe answers with a tone that darkens by a breath and sets itself beside the heartbeat of the room. Outside, Ensville shifts on its pillow. A car forgotten at the curb remembers to lock with one polite chirp. A baby upstairs reaches for a pacifier and finds it without waking. Irwin, on his porch, learns the last word in his list and sets the book down without losing the warmth in his hands. Sandman nods at the bowls Billy holds. Those go back up the throat, one at a time, with patience between. He looks at Mandy. You tell us when. She glances at Grim, at Billy, at the blue shadow of the hourglass across the floorboards. The scythe hum is not right yet, but it is righter than before. We'll pour on the slow beat, she says, and we'll tune as we do it. Everyone agrees without speaking. The workshop lifts its lamps a measure. Night moves its chair closer. The first bowl will go in on the next long breath. The workshop waits the way a lake waits before the first stone. Lamps hover a shade lower, a hush draped over their halos. Sandman lifts his hand and the room breathes with him. Mandy listens for the space between heartbeats and nods. Now. Billy tilts the first bowl. Grains slip like softened rain. They find the narrow seam and pour up, as if the hourglass has decided gravity is a suggestion, not a law. Grim touches a rune on the scythe's throat. The hum lowers a hair and slides alongside the spill instead of arguing with it. The sand reaches the waist and disappears into the upper bell, where it spreads like sleep across a pillow. Pause, Mandy says, and Billy straightens the bowl. The last few grains tip, land, and settle. Sandman tightens the ring by a fingertip. The seam warms under his palm. Hush, he whispers, 'cause words can be tools when you use the small ones right. They fall into a rhythm. Pour on the long breath. Pause on the next. Let go on the third so hands can stop being hands and be patience instead. Grim keeps his bone fingers on the runes, tuning the scythe a breath at a time. One touch to the sign for keep, one to the sign for soften. The blade's song lowers until it finds the room's note and rests there, true enough to make shadows stand rounder on the floor. Billy's shoulders stay steady. It's hard work in the way good waiting is hard. Sandman swaps him bowls the moment his elbows ask, not sooner, not later. Mandy sets each empty bowl upside down on the bench, a neat row of little moons. The bats hanging over the sorting table turn once in their sleep, then settle again, tiny feet tightening and slackening in time with the pores. Between bowls, Sandman checks the glass at eye level. He finds the line that was a fissure and sees only seam. You'll hold, he tells it, like a person tells a railing thank you for being there before they lean. A bell the size of a walnut rings far in the workshop. A delivery slot opens with a polite sigh and slides in 3 paper slips, each stamped with the word tug. Mandy takes them without fuss. Night tug in Ennsville. A dog who can't settle because a toy is under a couch, a neon sign that blinks wrong and keeps a window restless, a sprinkler timer that forgot it's Sunday. We'll go after, she says. Sandman nods, already reaching for the drawer labeled Outreach. 2 bowls remain. Billy glances at Grim. You ever get a cramp in your soul, he asks in a whisper, like when you hold your smile too long. Grim's teeth do not move, yet the room hears his answer. I used to. Then I learned to let the tools sing and just keep it company. Billy thinks about that as he tips the next bowl. The grains go up easy. Pause, Mandy says. A beat, a breath. Sandman turns the ring a last hair. The kind of move you do after you've already done the work, just to say I'm still here. Last bowl, she adds. And Billy grins with half his face because the other half is busy being careful. The final grains climb. The dune in the tray thins to nothing and leaves a gentle dusting like the memory of a storm long gone. Sandman brushes it with 2 fingers into a vial labeled Spare Patience and sets it on a shelf where it can wait without wanting. Grim lifts the scythe from its pegs and holds it flat in both hands as if offering a plate. He listens. The hum has changed. It's the kind of tone that makes a window latch decide to behave, that teaches a cupboard door to stop announcing itself. Soft, round, a note that begins and ends without catching on anything. Mandy circles the hourglass once, the way a lighthouse walks its deck. No leak, no hairline bright where it shouldn't be. She rests her palm on the glass. It is neither warm nor cold. It is exactly the temperature of a quiet forehead. Good, she says. Sandman scribbles 3 lines in a ledger that makes no noise when it closes. Hourglass resealed. Dream sand, return. Scythe retuned to workshop key, may drift toward town key on the walk, which is correct. He looked at the slips Mandy set aside. Outreach, then. He hands her a small pouch of hush and a roll of thread labeled Through and Through. He gives Billy a tiny bell on a ribbon, for when a corner needs a yes, not a shh. They step back to the shell-colored door. The eye knocker blinks open, sees the blade sitting quiet in Grim's hands, and smiles without moving. Out in Ennsville, the platform boards keep their cool as if someone ironed the night. The sign still says Ennsville Lull. It feels right. The walk home bends around the small tugs, the slips named. First, the house with the neon sign. Mandy stops beneath the window. The sign blinks too fast. All edge and no breath. Grim rests the scythe along the storefront ledge, blade pointed toward the glass like a tuning fork at the side of a piano. Billy rings the tiny bell once, a sound round as a dropped pebble in deep water. The neon listens. Its blink stretches a little, then a little more, until it blinks on the beat the hum suggests. A bedroom above turns its pillow and finds the cool side. 1 tug done. Next, the yard with the obstinate sprinkler. Its timer wheel sticks on the same tooth and clicks every 7 seconds. The kind of sound that convinces a brain it should stay awake just to count. Mandy kneels, palming a crumb of hush into the timer housing. Grim touches a rune for loosen. Billy turns the wheel past the tooth. The click stops. The sprinkler remembers it is a morning creature. Somewhere in that house, a list in someone's head drops a line and no one misses it. At the corner, a dog with a tail like a metronome stands, ears uncertain. A rubber bone lies just under the couch inside, where paws can't reach. Billy tucks the bell under the door and rings. A hand appears, finds the toy, offers it without fanfare. The dog takes it, carries it to the rug, and sinks with a sigh that reaches the ceiling. A light upstairs goes out. They cut through the vacant lot by the billboard, where tall grass leans in stripes. Irwin's porch light is off now. His book sits closed beside him, with the pencil tucked through the spiral. He snores once, a small trumpet, and then remembers quiet. Grim's scythe holds its tune even in the open air, adjusting to the city's key the way a voice softens when it enters a church. At the old quarry fence, dawn has not yet argued its case. The sky is still on the night side. They pass the grocery carts, rectangles patient as parked boats. A cat along the dumpster raises its head, sees what comes with them, and decides to purr without noise. Back at the yard under the attic hatch, the grass purl cools their ankles again. The scythe does not hum. It keeps a tone inside itself like a lamp keeps a filament. Sandman's postcard lies on the trunk lid where they left it. Grim slides it under the moon paperweight, a promise kept and filed. Billy lies on the quilt and lets his eyes close because they can now. Mandy stands another breath, then another, making sure the workshop's calm didn't leak on the walk. Satisfied, she sits on the edge of the trunk, hands folded, the queen of exactly enough. Grim leans the scythe in its cradle. He rests his palm on the hourglass rune for a count of 3. The blade answers with a note that says, "I'm here, and I will behave." Outside, a bird considers a first chirp and postpones it. Inside, the fridge hum blends into the room's new key. On the windowsill, a thread of night lifts and thins. There are still slips in Sandman's drawer. There are always slips. But the big ones, the hum, the leak, the hourglass throat, have found their quiet. Mandy looks toward the window where the dark holds its last shapes. "We'll walk the block once more," she says after a little. Ennsville is good at pretending to be tough. It's better at letting itself be held. Billy is already dreaming. Grim tips his skull back and exhales a long, thin line that sounds like the word yes, stretched into a hammock. The attic boards approve. The attic dozes in its new key. Down in the yard, the grass holds one last cool along its blades. Mandy listens for the place in the night where footsteps do the most good. "There," she says. A word no louder than a hand on a doorknob. They go. Ennsville at 1 in the morning is less loud than it pretends. Street names keep their voices to themselves. A traffic light at Maple and 3rd blinks yellow too quickly, urgent where it should be patient. Grim holds the side level, its song tucked inside like a calm heartbeat. Billy carries the tiny bell at his chest and walks without skipping because the street likes steady. They stop beneath the light. Its casing ticks with leftover heat. Mandy looks up and waits for the part of the blink that wants to slow down. "Now," she says. Grim touches a quieting rune. Billy rings a small circle of sound that lands and spreads. The blink takes a longer breath than another and settles into an easy rhythm that lets cars dream of stopping without waking. Upstairs, someone on Maple rolls to the cool side of the pillow and smiles into sleep with no reason they could name in the morning. On Sycamore, wind chimes clatter like silverware in a drawer, not scolding, just restless. A length of twine has wound itself around 2 tubes and argues with every breeze. Billy stands on the fire hydrant and holds the chimes steady. Grim lifts the scythe so its hum threads the night between the tubes. Mandy slides her fingers into the knot, untwists once, twice, and the twine learns a softer job. The chimes try again and find a slower sentence, a lullaby that knows where to end. They pass the small park where swings hang like commas. One squeaks on every sway of the air, a complaint born of dry chain. Grim leans the scythe against the fence. Billy produces from his pocket a thumb-sized bottle of the hush Sandman gave and dabs a single drop on the hook. Mandy takes the seat in both hands and rocks it forward and back with the gentleness of returning a book to a shelf. The squeak becomes a whisper, then nothing. A raccoon in the bushes blinks, decides the night is behaving, and resumes the business of unwrapping a sandwich someone meant to finish tomorrow. On Birch Lane, a window shade taps the sill. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm of a thought that won't quit. Mandy lifts the sash a finger's width and lowers it again with a soft authority. The tap learns the room's new rule and stops. On the opposite side, a fish tank pump burbles too loudly. Billy kneels, straightens a hose, and the water remembers it can be a soft river instead of a bragging brook. Irwin's block lies ahead. Porch lights mostly out, lawn chairs folded like sleeping elbows. His book on vocabulary has slid to one side of the step. A moth rests on the cover, all triangles and quiet. Billy tips the book back to flat. Mandy tucks the pencil more securely into the spiral. Grim passes without touching, and yet the scythe's tucked tone seems to move the heavy air off Irwin's shoulders like a careful blanket straightened at 2 corners. Irwin sighs and says the last word in a dream voice that is not for anyone to hear but the porch. At the corner store, the soda cooler hums one note above comfort. It would take tools to tune it, which they do not bring. Mandy places her palm on the glass, finds the seam in the sound, and looks at Grim. He nods. The scythe's quiet hum slides beside the cooler's voice, showing it a place to settle. The motor eases down a shade. Frost blossoms in a polite ring around the orange drinks and stops where it should. Somewhere in the back room, a timer clicks over to later and leaves, now alone. They cut past the cemetery fence where Grim spends days being official and nights being kind. Tonight even the shadows have taken off their shoes. A small stone near the gate has leaned all week in a way that suggests it would like to see the sky from a truer angle. Grim sets the butt of the scythe against the base and presses with the patience he learned a long time ago. The stone writes itself a finger's breadth. The engraved name seems easier to read in the lamp glow, as if letters rest too when they are held straight. Across the street, a bakery truck noses to the curb with the manners of a good guest. The driver steps down, sets one crate on the stoop, then stands for a second longer than necessary. He can't say why, but he listens to the quiet the way you listen at a seashell, and then smiles to himself and whistles low on his walk back to the cab. Billy almost whistles with him, then remembers the neighbors and lets the whistle be a feeling. They take the long way back along the quarry fence so the door to the workshop can know they kept their promise. The shell-colored wood shows no seam. The brass knocker eye pretends to sleep and is pleased. Mandy taps once on the frame anyway, the smallest thank you, and the frame warms under her fingers like a cat that approves. The last tug waits at an upstairs window where a nightlight flickers a nervous yes, no. A child's stuffed rabbit sits slumped on the sill as if it tried to keep watch and got sleepy. Billy lifts the bell and doesn't ring it yet. Mandy breathes. Now. Billy gives the bell one small, round, wordless note. The nightlight hears it and chooses yes, steady this time. The rabbit looks less like a sentinel and more like a friend who can sleep on duty because someone else has the watch. They arrive at the yard as the first ink blue gray reaches up the trunks of the trees. The grass gives them back the last of the night's cool. The attic ladder is a quiet invitation. Billy pockets the bell as if it were a heart he means to keep kind. Grim rests the scythe across his shoulders for a step, then lowers it because this is not a night for carrying symbols like banners. Mandy touches the trunk lid where Sandman's postcard rests and makes a list in her head she will not write down. It includes nothing dramatic and everything important. Back in the attic, the air holds the clean-smelling hush of a house that knows where all its edges are. The scythe sits in its cradle and keeps its good tone to itself. Grim eases onto a stool that has learned his shape. Billy sprawls on the quilt in the exact starfish that means absolutely still. Mandy sits with her back to the hourglass trunk and lets her eyes close in the way that is not surrender so much as agreement. The town will walk toward morning with fewer pebbles in its shoes. The big jobs are done. The small jobs taught themselves. The slips in Sandman's drawer will be there tomorrow, new ones, stacked under old. But tonight the page is turned to the side that says rest. Dawn leans a pale elbow on Ennsville's windowsills and waits. The attic keeps its easy key. Grim tilts his skull, listening, and hears a sound that doesn't belong to morning yet. Far off, a school bell rehearses with too much edge, testing a sharp ring that could chip the quiet. The shell-colored postcard under the moon paperweight curls once and uncurls, as if a breeze inside the ink is trying to speak. A penciled addendum has appeared along the margin, in Sandman's neat hand. If there's time, The bell at Ensville Elementary needs its breath softened. Children bring enough thunder. The bell must carry a cloud. Mandy is already standing. Let's go. Billy pops up from the quilt like toast and then remembers to be gentle, folding himself back down to quiet feet. Grim lifts the scythe. It keeps its new tucked tone, a lantern with the wick turned low. Streets smell like wet concrete and rye toast. Sprinklers agree to wait. Delivery vans practice being considerate. They cross the yard and cut behind the bakery. The driver from last night spots them and tips his cap without noise, as if acknowledging a pact. Enville Elementary sits square and earnest, its flag still sleeping against the pole. The bell tower is only 3 stories up, but it thinks it's taller when it's nervous. A side door knows Grim and decides not to creak. Stairs climb in careful steps to a hatch where the bell keeps its anxieties. Inside the belfry, dust floats like slow applause. The bell hangs in its frame, bronze shoulders tight. A leather strap that should be supple is dried at the edge and bites the clapper with each swing. On the beam, someone long ago carved initials in a timid hand. First week jitters, Mandy says, almost smiling. Even buildings get them. Grim props the scythe on 2 pegs, blade a quiet smile along the wood. Billy opens Sandman's pouch and sets out the small tools labeled with polite nouns, hush, pause, through and through. He lifts the roll of soft thread and the tin of oil that smells faintly of vanilla and sleep. Mandy strokes the leather with 2 fingers, the way you soothe a dog that hasn't met you yet. It would like a drink, she says. Grim holds the strap while Billy paints the oil along its edge, one patient brush, then another, until the fibers stop frowning. Mandy wraps 2 loops of through and through thread around the clapper's neck, snug but not bossy, a scarf taught by someone who loves winter. The bell breathes once, a deep metal inhale. Test, Billy whispers. Grim nods. He steadies the frame with one hand and nudges the rope with the other, just enough to let the clapper think about its job. The bell answers with a rounder note, the sound a hand makes patting a blanket smooth across a row of desks. Better. Not a clang, a call. Below them, a janitor rolls a cart down the hall. He pauses under the hatch and tilts his head. That's the sound, he murmurs to no one and keeps rolling. In a classroom near the playground, a fish tank hum adjusts itself to match. The rope pulley squeaks a protest. Billy fishes out a sliver of soap from the pouch and rubs the axle with a single, careful stroke. The squeak melts into silk. Mandy presses her palm to the bell's rim where children's names have touched it on field days. Stay soft, she says. It agrees. On their way down, they pass the music room. A piano lid stands open a polite inch. The top F is bright where it should be kind. Grim rests the scythe along the case. Its quiet tone hints at the missing shade. Billy finds the small felt strip that slipped sideways and coaxes it home. Mandy presses one key, then another. The cord lands like sunlight on a row of lunch trays. Outside, early buses whisper into place. On the playground, tetherballs hang still as moons tied to short strings. The flag wakes and breathes against the pole once without snapping. The teachers who arrive with coffees wear faces that haven't decided yet. The bell will help. They cross Maple on the green. The traffic light keeps its new patients from last night. A woman walking a pug meets their eyes and, for reasons she will not chase, takes her next breath slower and longer than the last and smiles at how it lands. Back by the bakery, the driver slides a muffin across the stoop. For after, says the card tucked under it, written in tidy block letters. Billy looks to Mandy. She nods once. He tucks the muffin into his shirt like a treasure map that leads to later. The postcard under the moon paperweight has grown another line of Sandman's pencil. If you pass the library, the children's room rocking chair squeaks on the backstroke. Librarian is heroic. Give the chair a secret. The library's doors unlock with the exact amount of sound a promise should make. Inside, the children's room waits in a polite scatter of blocks and picture books queued for story hour. The rocking chair sits by the mural of a whale that looks like a cloud with good intentions. Its rear runner chirps every time it rocks back, the kind of tiny needle that unthreads a nap. Grim stands watch while Mandy tips the chair forward. Billy dabs a whisper of oil onto the runner mortise, then lays a single hair of thread between wood faces the way you place a bookmark in a chapter that needs breath. Mandy rocks once. The sound is gone. She rocks again, slower. The room finds the beat it prefers. A librarian with pens in her bun peeks around a shelf, sees nothing dramatic, and somehow feels braver about today. They leave the library as the city lifts its eyelids properly. Sunlight measures the street in careful spoons. The workshop door at the old platform is just where it was, pretending it was never there. Mandy taps the frame with one knuckle on the way past. The wood warms her skin. The bell at the school tests a single yawn of a ring in the distance, and then rests, happy with how much it will matter when it is time. Back in the yard, the grass has traded Pearl for dew. The attic's open hatch smells like floorboards and good endings. Inside, the scythe fits its cradle as if the wood was poured around it. Grim balances the muffin on the moon paperweight for later. Billy claims a crumb, then thinks of sparrows and sets the crumb on the windowsill instead. Mandy sits, hands folded, a list in her head that presently contains nothing urgent. That is the point. Below, Ennsville begins its version of day. Somewhere a recessed ball will thud without echo. Somewhere a nap mat will not slide on linoleum. Somewhere a teacher will pause mid-sentence and feel the room lower its shoulders because a bell decided to yawn instead of shout. Grim listens. The scythe keeps its temperate note. The hourglass trunk keeps its secrets. The postcard remains still. The quiet they made last night has stretched and found daylight shoes. By late morning, Ennsville has put on its daytime voice, but some corners still carry the hush like a scarf they forgot to take off. The postcard under the moon paperweight hasn't moved, yet along its edge a faint pencil shadow seems deeper, as if Sandman leaned his elbow there and thought of one more thing. Grim tilts his skull. "Hear that?" he asks the room without words. Mandy does. Billy does too, now that he's learned where to listen. They take the long sidewalk behind the grocery where the carts sit in straight rows like well-behaved geese. Sun warms the backs of their hands. A delivery truck door thumps closed and, politely, does not echo. The first tug arrives in the bright. The ice cream truck at the park has its jingle stuck in a loop. A chiming smile that forgot how to blink. Children on the swings laugh, then frown, then look tired without knowing why. Mandy stands in the truck's shade and waits until the jingle trips in the same spot again. "There," she says. Grim rests the scythe across his palms. Its tucked tone shows the tune a softer place to land. Billy lifts the tiny bell and gives the smallest circle of sound. The amplifier coughs once and finds its inside voice. The driver, who has been awake since before sunrise, looks up and rubs his eyes. "That's better," he says to nobody in particular, and scoops with the sort of care you give to something that melts. At the clinic on Pine, a heart monitor chirps a hair too eagerly. The hallway tries not to mind and fails. A nurse with brave shoulders puts a finger to her temple and keeps moving. Grim does not march. He drifts alongside the door like a cloud that knows where to pause. Mandy steps to the nurse's station and asks, softly, which room is anxious. The nurse nods toward 12 and exhales as if someone set down a box she didn't realize she was carrying. Inside 12, a wire has settled crooked on a small chest. Billy kneels, his bell in his pocket, because this is not a bell moment. And with the neat fingers he now owns, he smooths the lead against the tape. The chirp rounds out. The child's breath matches it. The nurse's shoulders lose an inch and keep it. At the crosswalk near the hardware store, a construction sign flap remembers to bang every time the breeze says boo. Billy climbs the base like a polite squirrel. Grimm's scythe hum shows the hinge how to be a hinge without an audience. Mandy uses a twist of through-and-through thread to teach the flap to touch home without clapping. A man pushing a stroller nods like someone who just got permission to like his neighborhood again. They walk past the laundromat where dryers spin in a row, round windows winking. One thumps once per turn, a sneaker gone rogue among towels. Mandy points. Grimm shakes his skull. No. Some lessons we let people teach themselves. A minute later, a woman opens the door, plucks out the sneaker, and smiles at the sudden quiet, as if she invented it. In a way, she did. Noon comes. Ensville does its fork-on-plate noises and its bus brake sighs. Even so, pockets of quiet bloom the way shade does under trees. At Irwin's, the porch swing creaks on one chain link that's been pinched. Billy palms a crumb of hush under the link and rocks the seat once. Irwin, inside at the table learning a new list's worth of words, says one out loud just because it feels good. Mellifluous he tries, and the swing agrees without a sound. They cut by the schoolyard. The bell does not ring. It breathes. The children run in lines that curve like kites on a well-set string. A teacher with a whistle she doesn't need today leans on the fence and watches with the relief of someone whose shoulders remembered how. Afternoon stretches long and a little sleepy. Behind the library, a rocking cart catches on a tile. Billy lifts the wheel over, not to show off, but to show how. Inside, the librarian places a new book on the story chair and it doesn't squeak, and she smiles at the idea that she can be heroic with oil and a hair of thread. On the way back, Sandman's door at the old platform is there and not. Mandy tilts her wrist and knocks once on air where the frame would be. The warm passes through her skin as if the workshop reached out and squeezed her hand. Good, says the part of her that only tells the truth. They return to the attic and find the postcard freshly penciled in the corner. Thank you for carrying daytime with hands made for night. If you have one more errand, the rooftop weather vane wishes to stop fussing at dusk. Through and through at the base, a breath on the bird. Billy pockets the bell. Grimm lifts the scythe. Mandy stands like someone who has decided to say yes once more, and then stop. The roof keeps its afternoon heat along the tar seams. The weather vane bird points west and taps a stutter on its spindle, impatient with nothing. Oh, Grimm's scythe leans against the brick. Its hum is so tucked now that it feels like a cat purring in a different room. Mandy wraps a single turn of thread at the vane's base, snug and kind. Billy climbs the ladder 2 rungs and blows one breath across the bird's beak. Not magic exactly, just permission. The tapping stops. The bird tries a slow turn and likes it. Below them, the old man in 1D shifts in his chair and naps properly for the first time in a week. They sit with their backs against the chimney as afternoon slides toward its golden hour. Ensville lowers its volume in inches. A mom closing a stroller latch doesn't click it hard. A basketball finds net with a shy thup that sounds like a compliment. The bakery door chimes once and decides that's enough. Back downstairs, the attic keeps its friendly cool. The muffin sits untouched on the paperweight because later still feels correct. Billy splits it in 3 with gravity as the knife and sets a crumb on the sill again for the sparrow that believes in patterns. Grim eats his piece with the appreciation of a person who knows how long it took to tune a town. Mandy holds hers and doesn't take a bite just yet. She looks at the scythe. It looks back in the way good tools do, ready, quiet, not demanding a scene. Evening will ask for one last circuit, the kind where you don't fix much because you made it so you don't have to. Dusk is when quiet decides whether to stay. Mandy rests her palm on the trunk that held the hourglass story and nods. One more. Ensville turns the page from afternoon to evening with care. Porch lights blink on in order like a row of kindly eyes. The air finds lavender where it hid and brings it forward. Somewhere dinner plates touch a table without ever thinking to clatter. Grim lifts the scythe, and the blade hum is a line drawn with a soft pencil. Billy tucks the bell under his shirt where it beats gentle against his ribs. Mandy looks down the street the way you look at a map you already walked. They take the quiet route on purpose. Past the park. The swing stays silent through one ghost push, then another. Past the clinic. The monitors breathe along with people who are learning to, not the other way around. The ice cream truck has gone home. The jingle sleeps folded like a clean blanket. Boys chalk dragons on the sidewalk, and the chalk does not squeak. The dragons look like they might purr. At the school, the flag lowers with a small sigh. The bell gives one yawn of a ring to tell the empty halls they did well and can stop working. The janitor nods at the sound and says into his cart, "That's what I meant," and the cart agrees by not rattling. They angle toward the quarry. The door to the workshop is more idea than wood now, but it's there for anyone who knows how to see shape and hush. Mandy lifts her hand and knocks once in the place where the knocker's eye would be. The warmth on her knuckles is a thank you sent through all the shelves. The bats over the sorting table will sleep till later. The vial labeled spare patients will still be on the ledge. The ledger will keep its tidy lines. The seam they mended will hold. Along the fence, Irwin sits on his step. He waves without lifting his book. His mother in the doorway watches him, but not with worry. Billy tips the bell in a salute, careful not to ring. Mellifluous Irwin says to them like a password. They grin back like doormen. They make a last loop past the library. Inside, the rocking chair moves once when a child climbs in with a book that says goodnight to many things. The chair doesn't squeak. The child believes in magic a little longer because of ordinary oil and a hair of thread. On Sycamore, wind threads the chimes in a sentence that is all commas, none of them tears. On Birch, the nightlight stays yes. On Maple, the traffic light keeps its patience. A dog retrieves a toy and falls asleep with it under his chin, no one having to get up to do a thing about it. The ice in a cup touches glass and decides not to sing for once. They stand at the yard gate and listen. Ensville carries its own key now, the one Grim tuned and Sandman taught, and Mandy matched, and Billy kept with a bell in his new hands. The scythe hum nestles into the city like a cat into a laundry basket. It doesn't try to leave. It likes the job of walking beside. In the attic, the postcard remains under the moon paperweight, as if it never moved. Yet along the very bottom there's a final note in Sandman's pencil that wasn't there earlier. You kept the seam and taught the bell to yawn. If ever the night forgets its song, you know the door. Bring hush. Bring pause. Bring let go. Bring yourselves. Grim sets the scythe in its cradle and touches the rune at the throat once, not to fix, but to say, "We did a thing, and the tool knows." It answers with a tone so round it might be silence shaped into a circle. Billy places the bell on the postcard and watches it not wobble. Mandy leans her back against the trunk and lets her eyes half close, the way you rest in a doorway before stepping through. Below them, the refrigerator hum fits the room. The staircase keeps its steps to itself. The yard trades lavender for crickets. Across the alley, a window light goes out, then a second, not in a rush. They split the last of the muffin crumb between their fingers and the windowsill, because sparrows teach rituals too. The first star appears where the weather vane points. It does not twinkle to be seen. It holds steady to be trusted. Mandy lifts her hand and makes a list in the air that contains nothing to do. Grim lets his bones settle in the way a chair does when you finally sit exactly right. Billy folds himself into the quilt with the precise satisfaction of a drawer closing without scrape. Ensville takes the breath they offered it, and breathes it back even sure. The big jobs will become stories. The small ones will become habits. The hourglass will keep its sand where it belongs until a new whisper asks for patience again. The bell will learn when to be a cloud. The rocking chair will remember how to stop at the back of the stroke. The chimes will be sentences with endings. The city goes to sleep in pieces, then all at once. Outside, the first cricket orchestra tunes to a key they didn't invent, but are happy to play in. Inside, the attic's quiet fits like a favorite sweater. Grim's scythe hums only as much as a heartbeat. Billy's bell is just a round dot on a postcard. Mandy's hands are still. At the edge of sleep, a child 2 streets over smiles into a pillow and doesn't know why. A nurse stretches her feet and doesn't count the ticks. A janitor clicks off the last light and listens for a clang that doesn't come, then laughs at how good that feels. Irwin dreams the word mellifluous into a lake and watches the ripples widen without hurrying. The night holds, the seam holds, the promise holds, and when morning comes, it will do so as if stepping into a room that has already been made gentle. Night has put its thumb on the dimmer, and the world has agreed. Ensville keeps its soft key. The bell breathes like a cloud, and Grim's scythe rests in its cradle with a quiet that doesn't need proving. Somewhere a rocking chair finishes its last gentle arc and decides to keep still. A traffic light remembers patience without being told. The hourglass holds what it should, and whatever slips will find your hands calm enough to guide it back. If a corner of your room hums, it can learn your pace. If a thought taps the sill, it can hear your slower yes and stop. You know where the shell-colored door is now, even with your eyes closed. Knock once in your mind. Feel the warm answer on your knuckles. Hush waits. Pause waits. Let go is already here. Breathe the long breath, then the next, the way sand pours without hurry. Let the night do its work while you do none. The seams are mended. The streets are softer. The stories have set themselves down. All that's left is the easy part. Sleep and keep the key. Good night. Sleepy mate.